It will be another sunny but cold day, with temperatures struggling to 1 or 2 degrees in most places. Again, likely to turn icy as things freeze up during Thursday evening as the map turns blue once more. It is staying cold into Friday, but some signs of a change over the coming days. We'll see some more snow perhaps coming into Scotland and Northern Ireland on Friday, and then things turn wetter through the weekend, but also milder.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, and then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. And coming up today, we're crossing to the House of Commons for Prime Minister's questions, but also a statement due from the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, on this latest tragedy in the Channel. 3 people confirmed dead, 43 others in hospital after being rescued after an inflatable capsized in the early hours of the morning. We'll have the latest live for you from Dover. Well, we will be crossing to the House of Commons to bring you Prime Minister's questions, but of course, likely that instant in the channel will come up with that statement from Suella Braverman on the instant following PMQs, we understand. But Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer, of course, going to head on the issues of the day, including all the latest strike action and, of course, no doubt the economy with the latest inflation figures coming up. We'll be going to Dover shortly, but let's first speak to our political reporter, Olivia Utley, in Westminster for us. And Olivia, indications already from Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, that Labour will be going on this issue of industrial relations and strikes with the is due to come out tomorrow.
Yes, strikes are definitely going to be a big part of Prime Minister's questions today. What the Prime Minister and the Cabinet are hoping is that public support for the strikes is now ebbing away quite quickly, which will help the government to keep it on its firm line. There are new statistics out today, new polling showing that public support for the RMT has actually gone down to 30% from 36% just 2 months ago. So that is very good news for the government. What's more difficult for the government is that the inflation figures have gone down from 11.1% to 10.7%, which is of course good news fundamentally. But the reason why the government has been pushing so hard against giving any pay rise at all to nurses above what they've already promised is that they're too worried about an inflationary spiral. And if we start to see inflation coming down faster than predicted, which is what's happening at the moment, that argument has a bit less weight. So I think we can expect Keir Starmer to go in on that, at least in some respects.
Yeah, and of course then the Home Secretary Suella Braverman speaking on this latest issue in the channel with what Rishi Sunak had outlined about the measures to tackle small boats. We'll be back to you shortly, Olivia, of course, for PMQs and reaction to it, but let's actually get an update now from Dover on the situation, the rescue and recovery operation. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White's been following the story there for us. Mark, these figures, we got 3 confirmed dead, but with the 43 rescued, 30 of them, we understand, literally had to be taken out of the water.
Yes, that's right. It was just before 3 o'clock in the morning that the Coast Guard started receiving these reports that people had gone into the water, that a boat had either partially deflated or capsized. So they scrambled lifeboats, Border Force vessels, Royal Navy vessels, Coast Guard helicopters and local fishing boats to the area. And as you say, some 30 people had to be pulled from the freezing water. The others were in the partially deflated small boat. Now, we understand that there are at least 3 fatalities. There have been ambulances waiting for those that have been brought ashore here at Dover. There is also a black unmarked van, the type used by the coroner's office here at Dover Harbour as well. There were reports a couple of hours ago of a couple of other people being spotted in the watermark, but the fact is, as this happened before 3 a.m. in the morning in those freezing waters for such a long period of time, then it's clearly not good for anybody immersed in those very cold conditions. So great concern, and some concern as well that that death toll, which, as I say, we understand is 3, could rise. It's still very much an active search and rescue operation at the moment. There are 3 lifeboats out there. HMS Severn, the Royal Navy patrol boat, is out there. HMS Trumpeter, another patrol boat, along with Border Force vessels. And local shipping as well are being asked to look out for anything at all. They'll do their utmost to try to find anyone else in the water, as I say, but with the passage of time, it's not looking good.
No, indeed. We understand the French now also sending a patrol vessel. The Coast Guard vessel Kermovan has also been made available to help with that. And I know Ashford Hospital there in Kent is on standby. But given the number of agencies involved here, I mean, Maritime Coast Guard, Border Kent Police, Ambulance, Fire, and so this is a forerunner, I guess, of what we heard from Rishi Sunak about this small boats command, but obviously in terms of an emergency response rather than a policing operation.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of it is they already work together and work very closely together, but they will now be formally structured into a small boats operational command, which means they'll be permanently assigned to this task. It just adds to a smoother operation and helps that joint working that they all do, and hopefully, as I say, just makes the whole process that bit more efficient. But they are doing, you know, a pretty remarkable job anyway. I should say as well, Mark, that adding to the problems that they have in this very significant search and rescue operation, which is ongoing, are yet more small boats coming across the English Channel. What we've had is 2 days of bad weather, which prevented small boat crossings. 500 odd crossed at the weekend. Then we had 2 days where no one could cross. The second conditions get to a point where they can push these boats out, then these people smugglers do exactly that.
Yeah.
And we're told that there are at least 4 small boats that have crossed in addition to that boat that got into difficulties at the centre now of this search and rescue operation.
Which is quite extraordinary given the time of year, of course. Mark, thank you for that update. Back to you, of course, as we get more. But let's just head back to Olivia at Westminster, because, Olivia, we had that pretty comprehensive plan announced by the Prime Minister, the various 5 points, including that small boats command, because they know, obviously, of the political cost of all this.
False information to the Commission.
Channel provides a pretty fitting backdrop to what Rishi Sunak was talking about yesterday. He was for the first time really couching the problem in moral terms, talking about the unfairness of it, not just for British taxpayers, of course, who often feel like they're badly treated, having to put up migrants in hotels, but also for the people who are actually crossing the Channel, who all too often this ends in disaster. So it is a pretty fitting backdrop. And some of the points in this 5-point plan really are new and quite radical. The promise that he's reached with Albania, which government critics just a couple of months ago said was impossible, to send back migrants straight to Albania, is a big breakthrough and will definitely be welcomed hugely by his backbenchers. Some of the other measures, for example, the patrol to get 700 more officers to help get small boats back, well, it's a little bit trickier to see how that's going to play out. Prime Ministers before Rishi Sunak have promised something similar, but without the help of the French, we know it's pretty difficult to get anywhere on that strategy.
Yeah, and Keir Starmer reflected on that as such. But interesting that we're now learning that the French have got this patrol vessel involved in this latest operation, a Customs Coast Guard vessel. Suella Braverman is to give this statement after PMQs. Do we know whether any more measures are likely to be announced, or that she will just give basically her assessment of the situation and, of course, to reflect on the lives lost?
Yeah, I think the most likely thing that Suella Braverman's going to do is reflect on the lives lost and give her take on the 5-point plan which Rishi Sunak outlined yesterday. He's written about it in the Daily Telegraph today. The Daily Telegraph and The Sun have been very supportive of the plan. So it's likely Suella Braverman will just put her weight behind that, so to speak, and make sure that the backbenchers who support her, she's a very powerful figure in the Conservative Party, are on side.
Yeah, we can hear Big Ben tolling 12 noon, so we're expecting PMQs to start very shortly. We'll head to the Commons, of course, as we see and hear from the Prime Minister. But last thought, I gather there's another COBRA meeting today to discuss this situation with the industrial relations and the various strikes.
Yeah, another COBRA meeting. It's pretty hard to see at this stage how we're going to reach any breakthrough. We know that particularly on the nurses' strikes, the relationship between Pat Cullen, the chief of the RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, and Steve Barclay, the health secretary, has almost broken down. We saw that press conference with her the other day where she could barely contain her anger at Steve Barclay, who has been unprepared, it's said, to discuss pay in any respect.
Olivia, I'm just going to interrupt you
strike.
because we've just got an update from Mark White in Dover. He's got some more details. Mark, let's head back to you. You've got an update for us.
Dover Harbour again to reports of another sighting of a small boat in the channel, and some information coming through from another lifeboat. There are several out there in the channel at the moment that they have 4 people that they have taken on board that they're currently working on giving medical attention to. Now, we don't know if these are people that were involved in this morning's major incident or whether these are people pulled off another small boat. The fact is, it is absolutely freezing out there in the channel. So anyone being taken off a small boat may well be hypothermic, so it could be that. But still some dramatic scenes unfolding in the channel as we speak, as you head, of course, to Prime Minister's questions.
Yeah, so another rescue operation underway. Mark, for that, thank you. Back to you, but let's go to the Commons now for Prime Minister's questions.
Further such meetings later today.
John Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, a 3.5-hour journey takes 6 hours. A straight journey ends up with 2 changes and a diversion. A train is cancelled at short notice. This has become the experience of a West Coast rail passenger. If Avanti do not get their act together, will the government cancel their franchise?
Very popular question, Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for raising this, and I share the frustration that this is causing to many of his and other communities. Our priority immediately is to support the restoration of services before then making any long-term decisions on the operation of the West Coast franchise, but we will be closely monitoring Avanti's rollout of its recovery plan and holding them account for delivering for passengers.
Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister? Our prayers go out to those who capsized in the freezing waters of the Channel last night. It's a reminder that the criminal gangs running those routes put the lives of the desperate at risk and profit from their misery. They must be broken up and brought to justice. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow will be the first ever nationwide nurses' strike. All the Prime Minister has to do to stop that is to open the door and discuss pay with them. If he did, the whole country would breathe a sigh of relief. Why won't he?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have consistently spoken to all the unions involved in all the pay disputes that there are. But I am glad he's raised our nurses, because they do incredible work, and it's worth putting on record. It's worth putting on record what exactly we have done for our nurses. Last year, when everyone else in the public sector had a public sector pay freeze, the nurses received a 3% pay rise. When the RCN asked for more in-work training, we gave every nurse and midwife a £1,000 training budget. And when they asked for nurses' bursaries, we made sure that every nursing student received a £5,000 grant. That's because we do work constructively, and we will continue to back our nurses.
Mr. Speaker, nurses going on strike is a badge of shame for this government. Instead of showing leadership, he's playing games with people's health. And there is a human cost. Alex from Chester has been waiting for a gallbladder operation for nearly 6 months. He's in so much pain, he's been off school since then. His operation has already been cancelled twice. His mum, who I spoke to this morning, is worried sick. When she heard that strikes could be called off, she was massively relieved. She's desperate for the Prime Minister to resolve this. All he needs to do is simply meet the nurses. Now, Alex's mum is listening to this. She doesn't want to hear him blaming everybody else. She doesn't want his usual ducking of the question. She's tuned in now because she wants him to explain what is he going to do to resolve the nursing strike.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not just Alex. There are millions of others across this country, Alex and Mark, millions of others who will have their healthcare disrupted because of the strike. Now, the honourable gentleman says to get round the table, but we all know what that means, Mr. Speaker. That is just simply a political formula for avoiding taking a position on this issue. If he thinks the strikes are wrong, he should say so. If he thinks it's right that pay demands of 19% are met, then he should say so. What's weak, Mr. Speaker, is he's not strong enough to stand up to the union.
Mr. Speaker,
we know it's Christmas, but the party's not started yet. Come on, kids.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, in 12 hours' time, there's a nurses' strike. All he needs to do is meet the nurses. His inaction speaks volumes. As ever with this Prime Minister, it's Tory politics first, patience second. We've never seen a nurses' strike like this before. They've been forced into it because the government has broken the health system. Ask anyone in the NHS. They will tell you they don't have enough staff. 133,000 vacancies. And there's an obvious solution. Scrap the non-dom status and use the money to bring through the next generation of doctors and nurses. That's what Labour would do. Why hasn't he got the guts to do it?
Mr. Speaker, we're already investing billions more in the NHS. We're already hiring thousands more doctors and nurses. But he asked about backlog. He asked about backlogs and the waiting times in the NHS. And yes, what he always fails to acknowledge is the impact that COVID did, Mr. Speaker. That's why we're facing pressures. But we do have a plan. Not just more money, not just more doctors and nurses, new diagnostic centres carrying out millions of checks and scans, new surgical hubs delivering more elective surgery. But if we'd listened to him, Mr. Speaker, the backlog would still be growing, and that's because we'd still be in lockdown.
As usual, Mr. Speaker, he tries to blame everyone else. His department commissioned a report into the NHS which reported on Monday. That report said we've had 10 years of managed decline. It was not COVID. Responsibility is sitting right there. And the reason he can't choose nurses over non-doms is because he's too weak to stand up for tax avoiders. For 12 years, they haven't trained enough doctors and nurses. So we have the absurd situation of the NHS spending billions on agency workers to fill the gap. Why should the country have to put up with money that should be spent treating patients being wasted plugging gaps instead?
Mr. Speaker, let me tell the honourable gentleman what we are doing. We are actually listening to the independent pay review bodies. Want to undermine them. We've offered a fair pay deal. They can't even decide on a number amongst themselves. We're actually protecting the public. They're protecting their paymasters, Mr. Speaker. For working people in this country, it's Labour's nightmare before Christmas.
There he goes again, pretending everything is fine. Try telling that to those on waiting lists or those that can't afford to pay for a next-day GP appointment. After 12 years of Tory failure, winter has arrived for our public services. And we've got a Prime Minister who has curled up in a ball and gone into hibernation. If he can't act on behalf of patients or nurses or everyone who wants these strikes called off, then surely the whole country is entitled to ask, what is the point of him and what is the point of the government he's supposed to be leading?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about COVID not having an impact. Ambulance waiting times for Category 1 ambulance waiting times in February of 2020 were actually completely on target, Mr. Speaker. COVID has an impact, and that's why, as the Chief Executive of the NHS has acknowledged, this government is serious about its commitment to prioritise the NHS. But, Mr. Speaker, let's just have a look at the NHS in Labour-run Wales, shall we? The worst A&E times in the country, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, under the last Labour government, we had fair pay for nurses and no strikes. So I won't be taking lectures from him about that.
Order. Mr. Bowie, you promised to behave. Don't give me a Christmas present you won't want. Come on, Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, this is our final PMQs of the year. So I hope you will Oh, really? I hope you will... Mr. Speaker, what I was going to say was I hope you will pass on all of our thanks, at least on this side, to all those who kept our House and our democracy working. And I want to finish this year thinking about our friends in Ukraine. As a result of Putin's barbaric assault on their freedom, millions will spend Christmas in sub-zero temperatures without heating, electricity or hot water. Their suffering is unimaginable, but their bravery is awe-inspiring. So will the Prime Minister join me in saying that whatever other difficulties and disagreements we have across this dispatch box, we are and will remain united in our unwavering support for Ukraine's freedom, its liberty and its victory.
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I join with the honourable gentleman in thanking and paying tribute to all the staff of the House for the fantastic work that they do to support all of us. And I appreciate his comments on Ukraine. It has been a point of incredible unity across this House and indeed the country, something that we can all be proud of in our country, that we have stood behind Ukraine at its hour of need. And as I said yesterday, this Christmas, many families will be laying an extra place at their Christmas table, and that speaks to the generosity and compassion of our nation, and long may that continue.
Angela Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The A3 connects London to Portsmouth through Guildford, and I was delighted to see the new Solent Freeport announced last week, which will increase traffic flows. As the A3 narrows through Guildford, it is sadly the most polluted road in the strategic road network. Short-term sticking plasters like putting up 9-metre-high air pollution barriers that will entrench divisions in Guildford is not acceptable to me or my constituents. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it is time to think big, it is time to think long-term, and it is time to tunnel the A3 under Guildford?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question. I know this is an issue that she has long championed. I am told that National Highways are developing a range of different possibilities and solutions for the A3 through Guildford, and I know the Department for Transport will consider the case as it plans its future infrastructure investments.
SNP leader Stephen Flynn.
I wish to join with the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition in extending my party's thoughts to all of those involved in the terrible tragedy in the Channel this morning. Mr. Speaker, thanks to positive and proactive negotiations between the Scottish Government and Unite and Unison health unions, a pay settlement has been reached and strike action averted. By stark contrast, the UK Health Secretary appears completely unwilling to negotiate with unions on pay, and strike action is very much still on the table. So may I ask the Prime Minister, when will he see the error of his ways and follow the Scottish Government's lead?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the UK Government was able to provide £1.5 billion in extra funding to the Scottish Government for public services. The Health Secretary and other ministers have engaged fully, not just with the unions, but with an independent pay-setting process, which takes the politics out of the process and ensures that we can meet those independent requirements with a fair pay deal.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear, those words will ring hollow in the ears of those people who, unlike the Prime Minister, can't nip into Waitrose for their shopping, nor indeed even turn on their heating at this moment in time. And that's particularly true for people in Scotland, because as we know, average energy bills in Scotland are not anticipated to be £2,500 per year. They're expected to be £3,300 per year. People are genuinely terrified, and that's despite the fact that Scotland produces 6 times more gas than we consume, with some 80% of our electricity coming from low-carbon sources. Decades of failed UK energy and regulatory policy coming home to roost. Is it not the case that Scotland has the energy? We just need the power.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the honourable gentleman raised the question of energy support, and it's because of the actions of this government that we are providing every household in this country with around £900 of support with their energy bills this winter, £55 billion worth of support, and on top of that, next year there will be extra cost of living payments worth up to £1,200 for the most vulnerable, whether that's those on means-tested benefits, pensioners or indeed disabled. This is a government that will always look after the most vulnerable in our society.
Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my right honourable friend will know, the Mayor of London, despite objections, has decided to expand the ULEZ zone across all London boroughs, which will massively impact my constituents and those who share a border with London. Will he therefore urgently speak to the Transport Secretary and encourage him to use the powers at his disposal to reverse this disastrous decision?
My honourable friend will know that transport in London is devolved to the Labour Mayor of London, but it is disappointing that the Mayor, backed by the Leader of the Opposition, is choosing not to listen to the public. The zone is being expanded against the overwhelming views of residents and businesses, and I'd urgently consider the Mayor and the gentleman opposite to be on the side of hard-working Londoners.
David!
Can I associate myself and my party with the comments made by others on the tragedy in the Channel? Our thoughts and prayers are with the families' victims. Mr. Speaker, 40% of cancer patients now wait more than 2 months for treatment after an urgent referral from a GP. That's the highest proportion on record and way above the government's own cancer waiting target. I lost both my parents to cancer as a child, and so, like many people across the country and in this House, I know the devastating impact of treatment delays on cancer patients and their families. So I'd like to ask the Prime Minister 2 questions. First, can he give a cast iron guarantee that the dreadful cancer backlog won't get any worse? And second, when will the government meet its own cancer target?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very sorry to hear about the right honourable gentleman's parents. Indeed, I'm sure many of us across this House have been our families have been tragically affected by what cancer does, and he's right to raise the importance of meeting our targets. And what I am able to tell him is we actually are experiencing very high numbers of cancer referrals following the pandemic. He'll be aware of that. But thanks to the brilliant work of our NHS staff, cancer treatment rates in the most recent month for which we have data are now back at pre-pandemic levels, with a plan for them to increase further. And recently the NHS also announced plans to fast-track patients direct to cancer tests rather than have to wait for specialist consultation first. These measures will make a difference, and I look forward to updating on them in the new year.
Jerry Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the closure of the last bank in Cheadle, yet another of my local communities has been left totally bereft of a high street banking service. So I was pleased when I heard the announcement that Cheadle was to get a banking hub. Unfortunately, my delight was short-lived. When on closer inspection I saw that it was Cheadle, Staffordshire. Whilst I remain pleased for the other Cheadle, would my right honourable friend agree with me that my constituents also need access to cash and banking facilities to protect businesses and support our high street? And will he support our local calls for post office banking hubs?
Prime Minister. My honourable friend is a fantastic champion for Cheadle in Greater Manchester. She will know that the Financial Services and Markets Bill will establish a legislative framework for protecting access to cash, and alongside this, firms are already working to provide shared services, as she mentioned, like bank hubs. But what I would encourage my honourable friend to do is to contact Link, which can undertake an independent assessment of a community's cash access needs and determine if shared facilities are appropriate.
Fabian Hamilton.
Mr. Speaker, my constituent Sharon has an 11-year-old daughter who suffers from eating disorders and severe anorexia. She was forced to spend a year in hospital in Sheffield, 40 miles away, because there were no beds in Leeds for children with those eating disorders. This, Mr. Speaker, is completely unacceptable. So will the Prime Minister now commit to ensuring that NHS mental health provision for young people is dramatically improved so that no other family has to ever again endure similar trauma?
Minister.
Well, first of all, can I say to Sharon and her family, I'm sorry about what she's experienced. The Honourable Gentleman makes an excellent point. Mental health funding, as he knows, is increasing, so we ensure parity of service. He's also right to raise the issue of eating disorders. It's something that provision is currently expanding for. I think 2,000 more children were given the treatment and advice and support they needed last year, and there are plans to go further because it's an issue that needs tackling.
Jason McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Police Constable Nicola Hughes and PC Fiona Bone were savagely murdered in Manchester whilst on duty a decade ago. Nicola's dad, Bryn, is my constituent. He lives in Marsden. He was in Parliament again last week, continuing his campaign for emergency service workers and police officers who die whilst on duty to be awarded the Elizabeth Medal posthumously. Does my right honourable friend agree with me and Bryn that now is the time to commemorate and honour our brave police officers and emergency service workers who make the ultimate sacrifice by awarding posthumously the Elizabeth Medal?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I thank his constituent Bryn for his campaigning. Every life lost in the line of duty is a tragedy, and we remember the lives and service of PCs Nicola Hughes and Fiona Bone. We are determined, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that sacrifice that police officers and other public service officers make is recognised, and we are carefully considering the best and most appropriate ways to do this.
Kirsty Blackman.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Across these islands, people are suffering because of the woefully inadequate policies of this UK Tory government. They've crashed the economy, left millions in fear of the cold this winter, and are stoking division over striking workers rather than negotiating fair pay deals. Why is it that the only people that can rely on this Prime Minister are questionable PPE suppliers in the House of Lords, bankers, and former Prime Ministers getting taxpayer-funded handouts to defend their partying through COVID?
Mr. Speaker, the only people stoking division in our United Kingdom are the party opposite.
Question, Michael Fabricant.
Question 12, sir.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our priorities are growth, investing in public services and giving businesses the confidence they need to invest. I look forward to discussing this with the Mayor of the West Midlands.
Michael Fabricant.
Mr. Speaker, when my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, recently visited the National Memorial Arboretum, he was slightly late. But I don't blame him because he had to come by road. Now, my friend, the Mayor of the West Midlands, is supporting an extension of the cross-city line from Birmingham using an existing freight line to make it into a rail service to the National Memorial Arboretum and beyond. So, may I ask my right honourable friend, will he revisit the National Memorial Arboretum again, see the Armed Forces Memorial, and also come to Lichfield and see why we need a leisure centre?
I'd be delighted to come and visit the National Memorial Arboretum again, see my friend and the fantastic Mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street, to discuss his plans to drive growth and opportunity in the region.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is now well over 3 years since the Conservatives promised the end no-fault evictions. Enfield has the highest rate of Section 21 evictions in London. 30 families in my constituency in the last month alone were made homeless as a result of Section 21. I have families sat in my office trying to keep warm as we try to find them emergency accommodation. Will the Prime Minister scrap this shameful legislation? If so, when?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady will know that we have announced plans to do that and we await parliamentary time. But it's not the only thing we are doing to protect renters, Mr. Speaker. We have passed legislation already to protect tenants from rip-off fees, and we've capped holding deposits because we want to make sure that renters do have the protections that they require and they have their decent homes to rent.
Holly Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Small modular reactors are a hugely important part of our future energy mix. And this Conservative government realised that when it awarded Rolls-Royce nuclear section, based in my constituency, a grant of £210 for development. But there's still no clarity or plan for moving from development to deployment. Will the Prime Minister come with me to meet Rolls-Royce to discuss how to move things forward and ensure the UK benefits from this exciting opportunity?
Well, my honourable friend makes an excellent point. I'm delighted that government has awarded £210 million to Rolls-Royce SMR last year for research and development. This does have the potential to benefit the UK and support our energy security and climate goals. I look forward to getting updates and for working with my honourable friend to see this fantastic new technology come to life.
McCarthy.
When my constituent who has dementia was taken ill recently, it took 3 hours for an ambulance to arrive. He then spent 10 hours in the back of an ambulance outside A&E, queuing to get in. And the doctor said to him, "I'm so sorry, we're treating you out of the back of a truck." But as we've heard, the King's Fund has said that the government has presided over a decade of neglect of managed decline in the NHS. So isn't it the Prime Minister, not that doctor, who should be apologising?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that same King's Fund report also acknowledged that there was 40% more funding going into the NHS under this Conservative government. But we do need to make sure that that funding makes a difference. That's why this winter £500 million is being deployed to move people out of hospital beds into social care, to speed up those discharges specifically so that ambulances won't be queuing as much as they currently are. And that money is already making a difference on the ground.
Saki Bhatti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The community in Kingshurst, which I represent, has suffered an unimaginable tragedy earlier this week when 4 children fell through the ice at Babsmill Lake. Sadly, 3 of the children did not survive, and one, a 6-year-old, is fighting for his life. They and their families are all in my thoughts and prayers. Will my right honourable friend pay tribute to the community in Kingshurst, which has come together and is supporting each other to get through this tragedy? And will you recognise the heroic efforts of the emergency services, including the police officer who used his bare hands to try and break through the ice and then jumped in the water with fire service personnel without the PPE, risking their own lives to save the young children?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and can I send my condolences to the family and friends of all of those who lost their lives. I also join him in paying tribute to our emergency services for, as he said, their incredibly selfless actions. This whole event has completely shocked the local community, and I know that my honourable friend will continue to do all he can to support his constituents at this difficult time.
Dame Angela Riedel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This year the Tory party has given us 5 education secretaries, 4 chancellors, 3 prime ministers, 2 leadership coups. And Mr. Speaker, the Partridges had to sell the pear tree to pay the gas. So, Mr. Speaker, isn't it the case that after a year of Tory chaos, incompetence and self-indulgence, the best Christmas present the Prime Minister could give to the British people is a general election?
Mr. Speaker, they're happier with that than before, Mr. Speaker. But all I'd say, when it comes to what the British people need this Christmas, Mr. Speaker, in order to ease the disruption on their lives, the best thing that the party opposite could do is tell their union bosses to call off these damaging strikes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After the Second World War, Winston Churchill sent British Conservative lawyers to help to draft the European Convention on Human Rights, and that's something that we can be proud of in this country. But in an age of mass migration, the ECHR is now limiting our ability to control our borders. So in light of the tragedy in the Channel this morning, does the Prime Minister agree he should do as Churchill did, draft a new framework for refugees and human rights, including legal routes, but one way or another, and if necessary alone, we must be prepared to leave the ECHR?
Mr. Speaker, as I told the House yesterday, our new legislation will deliver a system whereby a person who comes here illegally will have no right to stay and will be removed to their own country or a safe third country alternative. That is the system that the British people want to see. That's a system that we will deliver, and I look forward to hearing whether the party opposite will support it.
Sir Oldley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As temperatures are plummeting and the cost of living crisis is deepening, ordinary families are facing a Dickensian nightmare across the country this Christmas. Mortgage bills are soaring, household repossessions are up, and nearly 500,000 tenants face a threat of eviction after falling behind on their rent. Too many people are worrying about where they and their children will wake up on Christmas morning. So will the Prime Minister agree to a temporary ban over the festive period on repossessions and evictions so that nobody has to live in fear of losing their home this Christmas?
Mr. Speaker, we provide a range of support to both homeowners and tenants who are in difficulty already. But the most important thing we are doing to financially support them through the winter is by providing almost £900 of support with their energy bills, on top of all the additional support for those who are most vulnerable, including pensioners. That demonstrates the actions of this government to help the country get through what we acknowledge is a challenging time.
Stephen Crowell.
Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, at 9:30, you'll lead this House in a 1-minute silence to mark 80 years since the British government recognised that the Holocaust was taking place in Nazi-occupied Europe. As we come together to mark that moment, will the Prime Minister join me in praising the Holocaust Educational Trust and the extraordinary survivors who continue to do amazing work, ensuring that the next generation understand and learn the lessons from the past?
Mr. Speaker, 80 years ago, Parliament listened in stunned silence as the truth of the Holocaust was spoken in this House for the very first time. So it's absolutely right that you, Mr. Speaker, lead a moment of silence in which we will stand together to remember and reaffirm that truth. I join my honourable friend in paying tribute to the work of the Holocaust Educational Trust, and it could not be more fitting that Britain's Holocaust Memorial and Learning Centre should be built right next door to here to Parliament. We must never forget the Holocaust, and we must stamp out anti-Semitism and prejudice in all its forms, wherever we find it.
Chris Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Caerphilly County Borough Council recently announced a £3 million cost of living hardship fund to help those most in need in Islwyn and across our county borough. Does the Prime Minister think it's right that local authorities are forced to cover the costs of 12 years of economic mismanagement by this Tory government?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what the honourable gentleman fails to acknowledge is that because of the actions of this UK government, not only are we supporting people in Wales and across the United Kingdom with help with their energy bills, we've also provided £1.2 billion of extra funding for the Welsh government to use to give to local authorities to support their constituents, and he would do well to acknowledge the benefits of the United Kingdom and the actions of the UK government.
We have a record 4,000 newly qualified doctors training to be GPs, which is really excellent. But we do have an issue with retention, which is made even worse in areas like mine, which have extremely high housing growth. As the son of a GP, what will the Prime Minister do to fix this?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know this is an issue that my honourable friend has talked and championed for a long term, and he's right to do so. We do have record numbers of GPs in training at the moment. We're also making sure that we support primary care appointments and primary care access, and I know that my honourable friend, the Health Secretary and Chancellor, are looking at how best we can increase retention, particularly with regard to pensions, and I look forward to getting his suggestions.
Final question, Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a written response from the DWP, it was confirmed to me that an unpaid carer earning more than £132 a week in their job is classed as being in gainful employment, and as a result loses their carer's allowance of £69.70 a week. Now, caring doesn't stop. It never stops. So can the Prime Minister explain to me the rationale of this decision, given that we are trying to get economically inactive people back into work? And secondly, can he explain why it's his government's position that £132 a week is enough for people to live on?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I first start by paying tribute to those up and down the country who give up so much of their time to care for others. And I'm actually delighted that the government is supporting the honourable member's bill, which will give a week of highly flexible paid leave to unemployed carers. I think it's the right thing to do, and I'm grateful that the honourable lady is taking it forward. The carers allowance is a means-tested benefit. It's part of many other benefits that are available to support people, and as I've said, right now there is significant support in place for people through Christmas with their energy bills.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. Just let the House clear.
That's Prime Minister's questions come to an end, but we will stay with the Commons because we are now expecting a statement from the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, on the situation in the Channel. Just to remind you now, confirmation that 4 people have died after that small boat got into difficulty in the Channel. Indications too that of the 43 recovered, 30 were in the water and are being treated in hospital because of the very cold temperatures. I think we can actually get an update with Mark White shortly from Dover on that situation. Mark, we'll head back to the Commons when we hear from the Home Secretary. But you were saying, Mark, that there are also others getting medical attention in the middle of the Channel.
As we speak, the Border Force vessel Ranger just coming back into Dover Harbour with a group of migrants they picked up, and the Dover lifeboat also just behind it, actually just entering the mouth of the harbour now. And they also have, we're told, 5 people have been transferred to them from the Woolmer lifeboat, described as casualties. Now that may be, it's nothing to do, we don't think, with the incident earlier this morning.
OK.
But because it's very cold out in the Channel.
Yeah, Mark, thank you for that. We'll get an update from you because Suella Braverman's just got to her feet in the Commons. We'll just hear quickly from the Home Secretary.
Terrible tragedy. His Majesty's Coast Guard, the RNLI, South East Coast Ambulance, the Ministry of Defence, Police and Border Force, together with French vessels and commercial fishing vessels and contractors at Western Jetfor, have responded. This morning, Mr. Speaker, I have spoken to Border Force officials based at Dover, Manston, and involved in the search and rescue effort. I've also spoken to my French counterpart, the Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin. A full statement will be provided to the House in due course once the facts have been fully established and the necessary investigative work completed. I know that everyone in this House and across the country will join me in expressing our profound sadness and deepest sympathies for everyone affected by this terrible event. I know that they will also join me in offering our profound gratitude to those working on the search and rescue operation. Yeah. That very much includes those who are responding to the incident. Commander Dan O'Mahony and his team are working tirelessly with military colleagues and other partners, day in and day out, to try to prevent this type of tragedy. They are undertaking immensely difficult work, and we should all be extremely grateful to them. Mr. Speaker, these are the days that we dread. Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo. As the Prime Minister told the House only yesterday, it is not cruel or unkind to want to break the stranglehold of the criminal gangs who trade in human misery and who exploit our system and our laws. He was right. This morning's tragedy, like the loss of 27 people on 1 November day last year, is the most sobering reminder possible of why we have to end these crossings. We recently agreed the largest ever small boats deal with France, with more boots on the ground patrolling their beaches, UK and French officers working together in both countries. The Calais group of Northern European nations works to disrupt trafficking and smuggling all along the migration route and has set an ambition for a UK-EU-wide agreement on migration. And since 2015, we have welcomed 450,000 people here from all across the world via safe and legal routes, making these dangerous crossings totally unnecessary. But it was evident that we had to go much further, which is why the Prime Minister announced a new package yesterday. It includes a new, permanent, unified small boats operational command, bringing together the military, civilian capabilities and the National Crime Agency. It will coordinate intelligence, interception, processing and enforcement using advanced technology, including drones. We are adding more than 700 new staff and doubling the funding for the NCA to tackle organised immigration crime in Europe. The Prime Minister announced yesterday a new agreement with Albania. For the first time, Border Force officers will be embedded in Tirana Airport, helping to disrupt organised crime groups and people smugglers, risking people's lives unnecessarily. And early next year, we will introduce new legislation to make it unambiguously clear that if someone comes to the UK illegally, they should not be able to remain here. Instead, they can expect to be detained and swiftly returned either to their home country or to a safe country where their claim for asylum will be considered. Late or spurious claims and appeals will not be possible, and once someone has been removed, they will have no right to re-entry, settlement, or citizenship. This will act as a deterrent, and it will save lives. As we grip illegal migration, we will create more safe and legal routes, working with the UNHCR to identify those most in need and introducing an annual quota set by Parliament. We will work closely with local authorities to determine capacity. Mr. Speaker, it isn't true that our capacity is limitless. We are already spending millions on hotels every day. People do not need to seek asylum if they are already in a safe country. It is vital, literally vital, that we end the illegal crossings in the Channel, and I commend the statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. This is truly tragic, deeply distressing news, and all of our thoughts and prayers will be with those who have lost their lives and their families and friends who have lost loved ones in the icy waters of the Channel. We will be thinking too of those who will be receiving support and medical assistance who may have been rescued as well. And all of us will give our thanks to the brave responders and rescuers in the Border Force, in the RNLI, in the Coast Guard, in the MOD, in our emergency services and in the French authorities, responding not just today to this awful, awful tragedy, but also who do such heroic work every single day. It is only because of their brave work that more lives have not been lost. It was barely more than a year ago that 27 lives were lost when a boat went down. And all of us have warned, all of us have feared that it was just a matter of time before more lives were lost. It is, of course, why the UK and France both need to act to stop these dangerous boat crossings. The brutal truth as well is that criminal gangs have made money from those lives that were lost today. They have profited as people have drowned. Day after day, week after week, criminal gangs are putting lives at risk for money. And the other brutal truth is that far from stopping those criminal gangs, those gangs have grown and grown. And the UK and French governments and authorities have failed to stop the criminal and smuggler and trafficking gangs proliferating around the Channel. Those gangs have created a multi-million-pound criminal industry with lives at stake, and the action against those gangs has been too weak. there have been barely any prosecutions or convictions and barely any inroads into the smuggler gangs. Just 3 convictions for people smuggling a month at a time when tens of thousands of lives are being put at risk each month. It is why we have long called for a long time for a major boost to the National Crime Agency, because we do need major action. And yesterday, the Prime Minister announced an increase for the National Crime Agency. I am glad that he has made some progress on this, but can the Home Secretary clarify what does it mean in practice? How much additional funding will there be in practice for the National Crime Agency? How much, and specifically for the action on the smuggler gangs? How many additional full-time staff will there be? And what is the sense of scale on this? Because I fear still that this is too low and this is too little given the scale of the problem we face. Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced a small boat operational command. Again, how different is that to the previous clandestine Channel Threat Command, led by Commander Dan Omani, which has been in operation for some time? Will it still be led by Commander Dan Omani or by somebody else? Will it be the Home Office or the MOD in charge? Is it correct that the Navy has been told they will be standing down on the 31st of January? Can she update us too on the French patrols and surveillance? Has the 40% promised increase in patrols started yet, and when will it? Was this boat picked up as a result of increased surveillance? If it wasn't, what was the reason for that? The Home Secretary has also referred to safe legal routes. She was pressed at the Select Committee on a lack of safe legal routes for children trying to unite with family in the UK. When will she be taking action to address that, to prevent children seeking to rejoin family in the UK, making desperate journeys? And she referred to the Prime Minister's statement yesterday. Can she clarify? We have also called for the fast track for safe countries and for the backlog to be cleared. The Prime Minister said he had set a personal target of 117,000 cases to be cleared by the end of next year. Number 10 later said that target was 92,000. Could she again confirm which of those it is? The responsibility for the lives that have been lost in the Channel lies with the criminal gangs. They need to be caught, they need to be prosecuted, they need to be jailed for the loss of life in the cold sea, and we need comprehensive action. We gathered in this House just over a year ago to lament the loss of 27 lives. None of us want to do so again. None of us want to be here again. That's where we need action before more lives are lost in peril on the sea.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, today is a day to demonstrate our sympathy for the victims and the families of this deadly and tragic incident. It is a day to express gratitude to our hard-working emergency services, border force and search and rescue and MOD colleagues who at this moment are conducting an operation in the Channel in very difficult and challenging circumstances. The Honourable Laney mentions a few points, and I want to respond to some of those in detail. The Small Boats Operational Command is going to be a new operational command that the Prime Minister announced yesterday as part of our plan to go further on the action that we will take to stop the boats crossing the Channel. This means that we are setting up a new HQ, the Small Boats Operational Command in Border Force, to bring our channel and processing operation under a single Home Office command with military support for specialist planning and operational advice. As part of this, we will bring in new air and maritime capabilities, including new drones, land-based radar, fixed-wing aircraft, and more. And we will be more than doubling our current permanent staffing levels, with 100 new staff at HQ and over 600 new operational staff based at Dover. That's a sign that we are strengthening our resolve, we are strengthening our will, and we are strengthening our efforts to do whatever it takes, as the Prime Minister has pledged, to stop the boats crossing the Channel. It will improve our intelligence and information sharing with the French. It will improve and build on the cooperation that we have with partners in France. The deal that we signed last month with colleagues in France is a big step forward in our cross-channel cooperation, for we share a common challenge. And that new arrangement will see more dangerous and unnecessary crossings being prevented. Last year, our joint efforts prevented over 23,000 unnecessary journeys. To date, this year, that number is 31,000. That in itself is insufficient, but it's a step in the right direction, and the agreement that we have struck afresh with the French will go further to enhance our joint working. She mentions safe and legal routes. Since 2015, we have made it possible for 450,000 people to come here via safe and legal routes. That's a record of which I am immensely proud. Those are people who have come from countries like Ukraine, from Syria, from Afghanistan. They're people who have come from all over the world, directly from places of danger, including via the UK resettlement scheme, where people have been selected by the UN refugee agencies from countries including Ethiopia, Iraq, Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, South Sudan, and Yemen. And so we will extend safe and legal routes once we have dealt with the appalling people smuggling gangs risking people's lives, as we have seen this morning.
So that's Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, answering the questions from Yvette Cooper on the situation as regard the migrants. The Home Secretary really filling more detail about the announcement yesterday from the Prime Minister on the small boat operational command and other measures, but clearly not enough to prevent these further deaths. Just to update you, 4 now confirmed having died in the Channel. Let's head back to Dover. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White there, who's been monitoring the very latest, and Olivia Utley with more from Westminster shortly. But Mark, we just were speaking to you before we had to break away from the Home Secretary. She was indicating, of course, this deal has been signed with the French to try and stop these things happening. Certainly that's not helped this particular time, but the French have been involved in this rescue and search operation, cross-channel operation, still continuing to see if there's anyone still in the water.
Yeah, I mean, the French will stop vessels coming off their beaches, tens of thousands they stop in any given year. But we know the way that this people smuggling operation works is that they may puncture a boat and send those migrants scattering and fleeing back into the dunes, but they'll just regroup and try again later that day or the next day. That's the way this people smuggling operation works. And yes, you're right, they are involved in this very extensive air-sea rescue operation that's still ongoing at the moment. It started before 3 a.m. with reports that this vessel had capsized and that people were in the water. A local fishing boat was quickly on scene and helped pull some of those onto that vessel. Border Force sent a number of vessels. The lifeboat sent 3 vessels. There were 2 Coast Guard helicopters and 2 Royal Navy ships, as well as those French assets, all involved in a very detailed search and rescue operation, which continues, as I say, at this hour. Now, we're told that 43 people were pulled from the water. 30 of those, had been in the water. The others had been on what was a partially deflated boat at that time. 3 of those we know have died. 4 of those, I should say, we know have died. It is possible, Mark, as the search and rescue operation continues, that we may see that death toll rise further.
Yeah, of course, the conditions with the cold in terms of the water and indeed just in terms of the air temperature as well, even though the sea is calm. Clearly, as you were saying, 4 others requiring medical attention on another boat with the danger of hypothermic conditions. Are there indications that perhaps more boats are on the way given this sort of window in the weather?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we had 2 days of bad weather conditions where they just couldn't put these small boats into the water on the French side of the channel. It calmed overnight to the point where they could, and so, of course, true to form, the people smugglers started pushing these boats off, one of them ending, of course, in tragic consequences. But we're told from our sources that at least 6 other small boats have made it across the channel so far today, and Border Force and lifeboats responding to other incidents. You mentioned there the casualties on board the Dover lifeboat. They've just been brought back into Dover Harbour, and as we speak are being taken off the lifeboat. 5 individuals, we understand, on board that vessel, and it may very well be that they're suffering from the effects of cold hypothermia, because it is very, very cold out mid-channel. And even if they're not in the water, it doesn't take long before the effects of the cold really start gripping an individual, and that may well be what we're seeing, Mark.
And a huge combined operation. I mean, I understand Ashford Hospital further inland in Kent on standby, with the A&E department effectively being cleared as a trauma centre.
That's right. The Coast Guard helicopters, the air ambulance, which was here at Dover Harbour, we understand made some trips to Ashford Hospital. Land ambulances were here as well. Sadly, the black unmarked coroner's van pulled up here as well. There's a couple of makeshift forensic tents that have been set up next to the lifeboat station here. Our colleagues, photographers down there, saw at least one of the bodies that was recovered, a body bag that was winched off the lifeboat and taken ashore. So absolutely tragic. As she was giving her statement to the Commons, Suella Braverman said, "These are the days we dread." Of course, it's only 13 months just over since we had that tragedy, Mark, with 27 people who drowned in the English Channel. Not on that scale this time, but any loss of life, of course, is tragic. 4 at the moment. It's a possibility it could rise further.
Mark, thank you for that. Back to you, of course, as we get more details. But let's speak to Olivia now at Westminster. And as Mark was indicating, Olivia, the Home Secretary giving that statement, these are the days that we dread. And yet Yvette Cooper still challenging her on the details of what the Prime Minister had announced yesterday in what this can do to try and stop this tide of boats coming across.
Yes, so Suella Braverman was essentially fleshing out what Rishi Sunak said yesterday, but there are still some questions. The strongest part, perhaps, of the 5-point plan is this agreement with Albania to send Albanian migrants, which make up over a third of the migrants who've come this year, to send them straight back to Albania, as it's a safe EU country, or essentially EU country. The weaker part, which Yvette Cooper was drilling down on today, is those 700 extra Border Force officers to be stationed in France to see what's going on and to try and help stop the flow. That is something which has been done before without much of an effect, which Yvette Cooper was really drilling down into today. Suella Braverman didn't quite have an answer to that, but she seems pleased with the plan, and it definitely has the support of lots of backbench Conservatives who've been deeply worried that this is going to be the issue that actually costs them the next election.
Yeah, and indications on this sort of small boats command, new drones, fixed-wing aircraft, 100 staff at HQ, 600 operational staff. I mean, clearly they want to get those details out, as you say, to reassure people, and indeed politically it's important for them. But in terms of PMQs, the last, of course, of the year, that was on the whole issue of industrial relations, and in particular this nurses' strike tomorrow, with Keir Starmer really attacking the Tory government on its record on the health service.
Yes, I thought for a last Prime Minister's Questions of the year, it was actually quite high energy. We normally see the energy sort of slipping away at this point in the year. But Keir Starmer was challenging Rishi Sunak. He sounded pretty firm on the Tories' record on health at the last 12 years. But Rishi Sunak actually hit back quite powerfully, essentially saying that Keir Starmer needs to get off the fence and say whether he approves of the strikes and would actually, if he were Prime Minister, accept the 19% pay rise that nurses are asking for, or to say if he actually doesn't support the strikes at all. And Keir Starmer didn't quite have an answer to that. Rishi Sunak also did quite well in hitting back at Keir Starmer's accusation of 12 years of calamities in the Tory government in terms of health by talking about the Labour Welsh record on health, which has the highest A&E waiting times in the country. So it was a pretty strong performance, actually, on both sides there.
Yeah. OK, Olivia, thank you for that. With Big Ben, of course, having struck 1 o'clock, you're watching GB News Live. We'll have plenty more to come in this next hour on that breaking news of 4 people now having died after that small boat's got into difficulty in the Channel. More on that, more from Westminster as well. Stay with us.
It's 1 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary says today's migrant tragedy shows how important it is to break up criminal gangs and stop channel crossings. 4 people have now died and 43 have been rescued after a small boat capsized in the English Channel. Border Force lifeboats and a Royal Navy patrol vessel have been actively involved in the rescue operation off the Kent coast. The incident comes less than 24 hours after the Prime Minister announced renewed plans to tackle illegal migration. Suella Braverman says today's tragedy is a reminder why we have to end these crossings.
These are the days that we dread. Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
The Prime Minister has defended the government's support for nurses ahead of an historic strike set to hit the NHS tomorrow. At today's PMQs, Rishi Sunak faced questions over a wave of industrial action this winter, denying that his ministers have refused to engage with unions' pay concerns. Nurses will walk out in England, Wales and Northern Ireland tomorrow unless a deal can be agreed. Mr Sunak conceded that millions of people will have their care disrupted.
Last year, when everyone else in the public sector had a public sector pay freeze, the nurses received a 3% pay rise. When the RCN asked for more in-work training, we gave every nurse and midwife a £1,000 training budget. And when they asked for nurses' bursaries, we made sure that every nursing student received a £5,000 grant. That's because we do work constructively and we will continue to back our nurses.
Well, responding, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said that the Tory party cannot cope with this winter of disruption.
After 12 years of Tory failure, winter has arrived for our public services. And we've got a Prime Minister who has curled up in a ball and gone into hibernation. If he can't act on behalf of patients or nurses or everyone who wants these strikes called off, then surely the whole country is entitled to ask, what is the point of him and what is the point of the government he's supposed to be leading?
Around half of Britain's rail lines are closed today as RMT members stage their second day of strikes across the country. Thousands of workers at Network Rail and 14 train companies have walked out, leaving some parts of the UK with no service. It's part of a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. It comes after the RMT rejected an offer of a 5% pay rise this year, with another 4% next year. Inflation has fallen to 10.7%, down from 11.1% in October. The Chancellor says getting inflation down is his top priority and plans are in place to reduce it by half. Despite the fall, Labour says the figure is still too high and shows the weakness of the economy. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says high inflation is still worrying working people.
With inflation still in double digits, it's obviously very concerning for families. Just in the lead up to Christmas, which is supposed to be a special time for families, I know that many mums and dads are going to be worrying about how they're going to heat their homes, whether they can afford the Christmas presents, the Christmas dinner that they had hoped to for their families. Now, the Chancellor will say this is all about global issues, but the truth is the UK is uniquely exposed, whether it's on inflation or economic growth.
A man who murdered a law graduate is refusing to leave his cell for sentencing. The court's been told that Jordan McSweeney, who admitted killing Zara Alina in East London, doesn't want to watch video evidence of his actions. He was caught on CCTV following at least 2 other women before attacking the 35-year-old as she walked home from a night out in Ilford. He's due to be sentenced this afternoon. The number of people who died in an explosion at a block of flats in Jersey has now risen to 8. The island's police says formal identification has yet to take place and 1 resident is still missing. The cause of the blast, which happened in the early hours of Saturday morning in St Helier, is still under investigation. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Mark.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. So as we were hearing in the bulletin, 4 people now confirmed dead, 43 others rescued after that boat overturned in the Channel in the early hours of this morning. Well, the Royal Navy, French Navy, Coast Guard, lifeboats, all involved in that rescue operation off the Kent coast. A search still going on, with other boats believed to have been launched as well. Well, speaking in the Commons in the last half hour, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, said that this was the days that we dreaded, the most sobering reminder possible of why we have to end these crossings, she said. Well, the capsizing comes less than 24 hours after the Prime Minister had announced plans to tackle illegal migration. Let's get the latest with our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who's in Dover. And Mark, clearly there is this multi-faceted response that's been going on, having heard from the Prime Minister about this small boats command that they want as a policing operation. It is now a recovery and still a search operation, we understand. They've still got the boats out there at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, 10 hours after the rescue services were first alerted to this boat in difficulties off Dungeness, and still that operation is underway. We can see from the latest information on the shipping apps that we've got that there are still 3 lifeboats in the area. There are French vessels, Border Force vessels and 2 Royal Naval ships. In addition to that, what you have and what we've had all morning is other small migrant boats coming across the Channel, 6 that have come across so far. And of course, as they come across, they all have to be responded to by other Border Force and French vessels. So that's taking assets away from the search and rescue operation that we've been seeing for the last 10 hours. So that is not good as far as the rescue effort is concerned. Local fishing boats are also helping in that effort, but at the moment it stands at 4 people who've died. No sign yet of any other individuals still in the water.
And looking at that map, clearly what happened in the early hours of the morning was in the middle of the Channel, so clearly very difficult to get to those people quickly. But 30, we understand, were in the water. I mean, bearing in mind the temperatures at the moment, just air and water temperatures, it's remarkable that they managed to survive as well.
Yeah, I mean, in the fullness of time, we'll get an idea what went wrong with that vessel, whether there was a sort of a partial deflation of the vessel that threw people into the water, whether it was swamped in some way, not necessarily by the waves in the Channel as such, because conditions had calmed a bit from the last couple of days. But remember, this is an enormously busy shipping lane, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. And what you've got are these big container ships, oil tankers, other large vessels that create huge wakes behind them. And if you're in a small, flimsy inflatable, it can be easily inundated or overturned by the wake of one of these larger boats. And as I say, they're passing all of the time, so it's possible that they were struck by the wake of a boat and that threw people into the water. But as you say, we understand some 30 people were in the water when the local fishing boat that was in the area got to them first, then followed by Border Force and lifeboat vessels quickly thereafter. But I say quickly, it's all relative. Still a good number of minutes that these people were submerged in very cold waters and clearly hypothermic. So we know that a number who made it ashore were then transferred to Ashford to the trauma unit there for specialist treatment.
Yeah, and therefore the additional pressure, of course, on that hospital unit as well as a result of all this. But, Mark, for the moment, thank you for that. Back to you, of course, as we get more details. But let's get the thoughts now of Tony Smith, CBE, former Director General of UK Border Force. Tony, thank you for joining us. And, of course, we've heard Suella Braverman's statement within the last few minutes in the House of Commons. These are the days that we dread, she says.
Absolutely, Mark. Yes, of course they are. And we had this, didn't we, about a year ago when a number of people lost their lives trying to cross the Channel. But unfortunately, more have continued to come. This is a perilous journey. And unfortunately, now we have another tragedy on our hands. The Border Force will be reacting, as your report shows, with other agencies. RNLI will be out there, with the Coast Guard, Navy resources, because our first and foremost consideration always is safety and saving lives at sea. But I'm afraid we can't guarantee that's going to happen every time, Mark, particularly in difficult conditions like these.
But are you surprised, given what we heard about the increased surveillance on the French side of the Channel and what we thought was increased cooperation with the French to prevent these launches actually taking place?
No, I'm not really, Mark, because I don't think anyone really thought that those latest initiatives would fully stop the boats. As you say, we have recently concluded a new agreement. There are officers over there now working shoulder to shoulder with the French on the patrols. There's a very long stretch of coastline. The smugglers are resorting to all kinds of tactics, hiding in sandbanks in freezing conditions until late into the night, and then making a dash for the water. As far as I know, the French position is that once vessels are waterborne, if you like, they will not intervene then. It's only if they can stop them on the beaches. And so I'm afraid we haven't been able to break the business model entirely. And, as Mark just said, there are more boats in the water as we speak. So that's not a panacea, I'm afraid. And, we will, I fear, continue to see more tragedies unless we can stop these boats once and for all.
Yeah, it's interesting you use that phrase business model, because that's exactly what Yvette Cooper, of course, was asking in the Commons about the whole issue that these gangs are making considerable amounts of money from this. Yvette Cooper was asking about this situation with the Royal Navy, where we understand they may be standing down operations on January the 31st. Is that your understanding as well now?
Well, my understanding from the announcement yesterday, Mark, is that there will be a new, what I think is being called a small boats command. Yes, a new commander will be appointed, but I think with a much bigger command than the one that was previously under Dan O'Mahony's leadership, but a bigger command, which will actually, I think, be led by military personnel, but it will sit with the Home Office and it will have a range of different assets therein, including Border Force officers as well as other enforcement agencies and even civilian employees. So I think there is a real political commitment now to recognise the fact that we have got a long-term maritime threat. We therefore need to restructure our commands to deal with that maritime threat with a dedicated and larger resource. I don't think it means the Navy will be out altogether. They will be in this. I think it's right that it should sit in the Home Office, because ultimately it's the Home Office and a border responsibility to deal with irregular migration.
And coordinating everything else, of course. Tony, as ever, thank you very much indeed for bringing us your reaction. And, of course, we'll update people with the latest from Dover on the situation. They just remind 4 dead, 43 rescued, but more boats in the water. Mark White telling us we'll bring you more as we get it. Now, to the strikes. Royal Mail postal staff beginning their planned strike action today over jobs, pay and conditions, with many small businesses claiming it's wreaking havoc on their operations in the run-up to Christmas. But the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, Dave Ward, telling us earlier that his members are still holding out for a negotiated settlement.
We would accept 9% if it was truly 9%, and that means the full value of 9% on basic pay. The company are not offering 9%. If they were, I'm saying live on air now, we would settle that part of the dispute. We've made that clear to them. We put that in writing. And also, as part of that, by the way, we asked them if they were to confirm that, along with some job security commitments that we've spoken about, then we would have suspended today's strike.
So that's the Postal Workers Union with the same sort of message as the nurses, of course, are going on strike tomorrow, saying that the action would be suspended if they were pay talks. But the strike's still ongoing, with the rail union, the RMT, taking strike action today, with major disruption across the country, and the government holding a COBRA meeting on how to deal with these problems. Well, joining us from Warrington, Sophie Reaper, our North West of England reporter, with the latest travel situation there. Catherine Forster, our political reporter, with us with the latest on the political front. Sophie, let's just talk to you. You can see it's very cold up there. It's not dissuading all those RMT staff who are still heading out on the picket line with the braziers going.
Yeah, it is absolutely freezing, but as you say, that hasn't stopped people from coming down to the Royal Mail depot here in Warrington today to join this picket line. Now, there's many reasons that the postal workers are striking. As you say, we had Dave Ward, the head of the union, on the programme earlier to talk about this, and one of the big issues is pay. But, of course, one of the other issues is that the unions say that the Royal Mail are trying to impose unfair working conditions on its workers, and they say they just won't accept it. Now, the union also said that last year the Royal Mail made profits of over £750 million, and as a result they can afford to pay their workers an increased wage in line with the cost of living and inflation. Now, this is day 4 of strikes for the postal workers. In December alone, we're also expecting them to strike tomorrow and then next week, the 23rd and 24th. Now, of course, the 24th is Christmas Eve, and speaking of Christmas, that is a time that small businesses absolutely rely on postal services such as the Royal Mail. I caught up with one small business owner to find out exactly how these strikes are affecting her business.
Being a small business owner and making my clothes handmade to order, it means my production time in itself is longer than usual. I've had to move my final order date a lot sooner than usual, meaning essentially I'm going to have less orders, less profit and less money to invest into my new collections next year. If I'm going to stick with Royal Mail, I just need them to stop striking, just so that I have a reliable courier service and I can make sure that my customers are getting their orders on time, and I'm not worrying once they've left me if they're actually going to get to them on time. If the customer doesn't get their parcel on time, I worry that they won't order from me again because they'll think that potentially it was my fault. And for me as a small business, trust and customer relationships are one of the most important things that help my business.
Well, obviously...
as we just heard, there's...
Yeah, sorry, do carry on, Sophie.
So, apologies. As we just heard, there's a real sense of concern for small businesses that if these deliveries don't arrive by Christmas, that customers will just lose trust in them, and ultimately that means they could lose business. Now, the Royal Mail stance on this is that they've offered an enhanced pay deal of 9% to be paid over 18 months, among other things. They say that this is their final and best offer, but from what we've seen so far, it doesn't look like the unions would be willing to accept this. So, as far as postal workers go, this Christmas of discontent looks set to continue.
Need for updating us with that situation there on the picket line, but let's now speak to Catherine about what the latest political situation is. Catherine, the indication is we've got a COBRA meeting that's either going on at the moment or has taken place. We've had PMQs focusing on the whole issue of the nurses' strike tomorrow, and Keir Starmer really attacking the Prime Minister and the government on this issue. He accused, I think the phrase was, of the Prime Minister curling up into a ball and going into hibernation over all these issues.
Made him sound like a hedgehog, didn't
Yeah,
he?
exactly.
Yes, there. It's striking. So the Cobra has been meeting again this morning. Health Secretary, Defence Secretary, Home Secretary, Cabinet Office to try to coordinate and mitigate the effects of some of these strikes, most specifically, obviously, the nurses' strike, which is due to begin tomorrow, and then the paramedic strike due to begin the day following. Obviously, this is incredibly difficult, and there's a lot of blame flowing around. The unions are blaming the government are blaming the unions. Labour is blaming the government too. But it's clear this is very difficult, and the government does not currently appear to be going to budge on this at all.
Exactly. I mean, that is one common theme when all the union spokesmen have, I mean, in terms of the postal workers, as we just heard, and the nurses who are striking tomorrow. We've tried to speak to the government, but basically they won't talk about pay. They keep saying the door is open, we go through that door, and then nothing happens.
Yes, and most notably Health Secretary Steve Barclay, who had a meeting with them on Tuesday, I think it was, and then, Monday, and then it came to nothing because he refused point blank to talk about pay. Now, Rishi Sunak, in Prime Minister's Questions, was very keen to say what they have done for nurses. He said the whole public sector last year had a pay freeze, but nurses had 3%, and, pay review bodies were going with that.
Yeah.
Even Labour have said that the 19% that the nursing union is asking for is unaffordable.
Too much, yeah.
Wes Streeting, Shadow Health Secretary, has said that. Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, has said that too. But it's not a great look, is it, that the government are not even prepared to discuss this?
Yeah, and one wonders whether, in fact, that's going to be the way forward, that they've just entrenched themselves and sort of go into the bunker. But there is a point, obviously, that the Prime Minister made, and that is that the independent pay review bodies were set up for this particular purpose, and they are abiding by what was recommended by those bodies.
Yes, the government are saying these settlements are fair, that they're reasonable. Of course, some of them were made before inflation went to what it is. But the government fundamentally is worried about embedding inflation, and also the other large factor is that the government is incredibly short of money, having spent vast sums during the pandemic, and doesn't really have the money, or if it did, they're saying it would cost every household an extra £1,000. That figure's disputed, I would say. But the money would have to come from cuts in public services elsewhere. So it does look like we're in for a very, very difficult December.
OK, thank you very much indeed for that. And, of course, we'll see what might emerge from that Cobra meeting a little later. But Catherine was talking there about inflation. We'll tell you about the latest figures showing it has come down slightly. But what does it mean for us as we head towards Christmas? The latest with our economics editor, Liam Halligan. Back in a moment.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News.
Frank,
fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
So, with all the strikes and those pay demands, eyes on the inflation figures as they emerged this morning. Well, it's actually fallen, but only back to 10.7%, according to the Office for National Statistics. Cost of living still at a 40-year high. Food and drink leading the way, still double-digit inflation, of course. Well, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, commenting on those figures earlier.
The truth is, apart from last month's inflation of 11.1%, this is something like the second highest rate of inflation we've experienced as a country in 40 years, with the numbers today showing that food prices alone have gone up by 16.5% in the last year. So this is clearly a very concerning time, particularly for mums and dads and grandparents in the run-up to Christmas. And the government can't be complacent about this, because this is also putting pressure on mortgage rates and on rents. And as we go into the new year, again, I know that many families are going to be worried about how they're going to pay their mortgage and how they're going to pay their rent. And we need more from the government to help with the cost of living crisis, but crucially to grow our economy, because without economic growth, it's almost impossible to raise living standards and improve public services. That's why we are in the mess we are in today.
So that's what Rachel Reeves thinks. What does Liam think? Our business editor coming up now with On the Money. So down, which is good news, but only a bit, down from 11.1 to 10.7%. I guess the key question is, has this peaked and is it going to carry on going down?
As we predicted yesterday, Mark, inflation is down a little bit. That's certainly welcome. A lot of people are saying this could be the peak in inflation, given that the really big price rises were around this time last year, as we approached that war in Ukraine and then the war in Ukraine itself. You can see here from the graphic, and GB News Radio listeners, I'll explain. Inflation in November, there it is, 10.7%. That means that the Consumer Price Index, which measures that basket of goods and services, in November was 10.7% above where it was in November 2021. That's up from the October figure when it was 11.1. And as you mentioned in your introduction there, Mark, it isn't the luxuries that are more expensive, it's the necessities like food. If we move on to the next graphic, you can see that food inflation was 16.5%. Wow. Bread was up 20%.
Cheapers.
Eggs were up 24%. Milk was up 34% and pasta was 37%. All those numbers, the average price for those goods in November compared to November 2021. So, you know, everyone trying to budget for Christmas is when you get lots of food in, family over, all the rest of it. Food's always a very big part of any family's Christmas in terms of expenditure. And we know that food prices are much higher than the headline rate of inflation.
Yeah, we know alcohol prices has gone up. Turkeys, of course, because of bird flu going up. However, there is a bit of a glimmer of good news, and that is that the petrol prices that came down on the forecourt helped to lower this inflation rate. But we know that can be pretty volatile.
It can, and the likes of Howard Cox of Fair Fuel UK. OK, Howard is sponsored by the Road Haulage Association. But, you know, he's still dealing in facts on the ground, and the facts on the ground are that the oil price has come down a lot more than the petrol and diesel price has. So there is still a concern that some energy companies, some oil companies, not so much the independent petrol stations, but maybe the big oil companies with their own networks of petrol stations, are slightly reluctant to lower petrol prices as oil prices come down. But in general, petrol prices and diesel prices are still, inflation in those has come down a bit, and I think that will continue.
Yeah, and this is key, because it's not just us filling our tanks, of course. This feeds into transport costs for those big supermarkets, getting goods from A to B.
A big chunk of the cost of any good is the cost of getting the materials to the factory where the good is made, getting the good to the wholesaler, then to the retailer. So at every stage, high transport costs feed into inflation. The real blot on the landscape, in general, this lower inflation is good news, though it's still high. It means hopefully
double-digit,
a lower interest rate rise tomorrow from the Bank of England.
Yeah,
but the real blot on the landscape, though, is if there is a serious deterioration in the situation between Russia and Ukraine, if the West and Russia become really belligerent, if the Kremlin wants to really turn the screw and limit gas supplies even more, if OPEC oil exporters cartel, in conjunction with Russia, the so-called OPEC Plus group, if they want to really put the pressure on, they can have their thumb over the sort of Western world's economic windpipe. If any of those big geopolitical things happen, that will feed straight into UK inflation.
And it goes straight up. And Belarus, of course, in indications that they may become involved. However, just talking about the Bank of England tomorrow, 12 noon we'll get the interest rate decision on the base rate. They were looking at a 13% cap on inflation. They thought it was sort of cap off there.
Yeah.
So is it possible that they may relax a little bit more?
It may be. You're right. Their central assumption was that inflation would peak at 13%. If they think inflation is going to peak indeed at 11.1%, because last month was the peak, then they may not need to raise interest rates as much as they thought they would.
Will still go up.
They'll still go up. Instead of going up by 0.75%, 75 basis points tomorrow, it'll be more like 0.5%, even 0.25%. And what that means, Mark, is in the money markets, the mortgage companies, when they borrow money wholesale to sell the money, to lend the money to us retail, that means they may get the money cheaper. And as long as there's competition in the mortgage market, that's a big if, then people remortgaging will get their finance a bit cheaper than they otherwise would. Still a lot more than this time last year. Interest rates are going up across the world, but not going up by as much as we thought they were maybe this time last week.
So a bit of a Christmas present, but quite a small one. Thank you very much indeed. And we'll have more, of course, reaction to that economic situation, more reaction to what's happening in Dover. 4 have died. It's been confirmed, 43 rescued. We'll have all the reaction with Mark down there in Dover. First, let's get an update on the news headlines with Ray.
Thanks, Mark. It's 1:32. Here's the latest. The Home Secretary says today's migrant tragedy shows how important it is to break up criminal gangs and stop channel crossings. 4 people have now died and 43 have been rescued after a small boat capsized in the English Channel. Border Force lifeboats and a Royal Navy patrol vessel have been actively involved in the rescue operation off the Kent coast. The incident comes less than 24 hours after the PM announced renewed plans to tackle illegal migration. Suella Braverman says today's tragedy is a reminder why we have to end these crossings.
These are the days that we dread. Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
In some breaking news in the last half hour, the Prime Minister has asked the lawyer investigating bullying allegations against Dominic Raab to consider 5 new formal complaints. The Deputy Prime Minister is now facing 8 allegations, all relating to his time at the Ministry of Justice. Mr Raab has previously denied the allegations. Labour is calling for his suspension while the investigation is underway. Around half of Britain's rail lines are closed as RMT members stage their second day of strikes over pay, jobs and conditions. Thousands of workers at Network Rail and 14 train companies have walked out, leaving some parts of the UK with no service at all. It comes after the RMT rejected an offer of a 5% pay rise this year, with another 4% in 2023. The number of people who were killed in an explosion at a block of flats in Jersey has now risen to 8. Police say formal identification has yet to take place and 1 person is still missing. The cause of the blast, which happened in the early hours of Saturday morning in St Helier, is still under investigation. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're watching GB News. Back to Mark in just a second. OK, let's get a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound buying you $1.2365 and 1.1610 euros. The price of gold standing at £1,463 and 45 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100s at 7,485 points.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to GB News Live. Let's bring you a bit of breaking news we're getting from Downing Street, where the Prime Minister's spokesman has been speaking to reporters following Prime Minister's questions. Now, with the strike due tomorrow with nurses, Downing Street is saying it's called on the Royal College of Nursing and the Ambulance Workers Union to ensure patient safety during the stoppages. The spokesman saying that we know there are discussions. Certainly we do want to resolve and encourage them to provide appropriate levels of care. The Prime Minister's spokesman pointing to a letter from the chief nursing officers about the RCN strike and the need to ensure patient safety. That is certainly our expectation, said Downing Street. So clearly they're upping the ante a little bit before that stoppage tomorrow, with, of course, fears about what it may do for healthcare and in particular emergency care. So that's just coming through from Downing Street. Reaction to that as we get it. But let's tell you now about a court case with a man who killed and then sexually assaulted a law graduate, Zara Alina, in East London, refusing to come to court to be sentenced today. Jordan McSweeney had targeted more than one woman before he attacked the 35-year-old as she walked home after a night out in June. Well, Alice Porter, our reporter, is at the Old Bailey and has been following proceedings there. Alice, what was the court told?
Well, Jordan McSweeney was taken from Belmarsh Prison here to the Old Bailey, but he refused to leave his cell today to hear the sentencing, and the reason given to his defence team is that he didn't want to see the CCTV footage of him killing Zara Alina, which was played to the court. The judge presiding over the case said that he could still come up and not see the CCTV, but he refused, which was, I'm sure, an extra insult to injury for the family of Zara Alina. And it's understandable why he didn't want that CCTV footage to be shown to the court, because it showed how he brutally assaulted and killed Zara Alina. But we were also shown activity leading up to her killing, the 2 hours leading up to it, where quite simply it's clear that he was preying on any vulnerable young woman to attack. We heard in court how at about 11 o'clock he was thrown out of a pub because he was making remarks about one of the female employees. He was inebriated, and so he was told to leave the pub. And for effectively 2 hours he hunted for any woman to attack in quite an alarming fashion. There was one woman who was stalked for around 20 minutes. We saw CCTV footage showing it was very clear that she was aware that she was being pursued. She went into a shop hiding from him. She came out again. He was still following her, and she ran desperate down the street. Now, luckily, those 4 women very much survived to tell the tale, but sadly it was a very different case for Zara Alina, who was walking home after a night out with friends, the 35-year-old law graduate who'd obviously so much of her life to live, but she was attacked from behind. Jordan McSweeney, we saw footage of him pursuing her for a considerable period of time, attacking her from behind, and then it was a 9-minute assault ensued in which she was repeatedly stamped. She was sexually assaulted and then left for dead. A particularly, I think, chilling aspect of what we were told in court was how Jordan McSweeney twice went back to where Zara Alina lay dying and stamped on her head so viciously. In fact, the prosecution said that she died as a result of strangulation and being stamped to death. He also removed items of her clothing and discarded them, as well as her mobile phone, the prosecution argued, in order to make sure no one could call for help. She was eventually helped by people walking past. An ambulance was called and she was eventually taken to the Royal London Hospital, but she sadly died from her horrific injuries. This case, of course, has provoked discussions about women's safety in London. Of course, this comes back on the case of Sarah Everard. The prosecution said she should have been safe walking home, and sadly, she simply wasn't.
Now, I understand, and one has every sympathy, that her family had to leave the courtroom as those CCTV pictures were played. We can understand that. But I understand that the sentencing from the judge later, that is likely to be broadcast, that the cameras, of course, can actually film the sentencing in these courts.
That's right. I mean, that's a sort of new operation that's begun just this year to allow greater transparency to proceedings in the criminal justice system. Murder carries a life sentence. The prosecution are going to argue for a life sentence with a minimum of 30 years. As you were saying there, it was very dramatic in court. There were a number of people crying. Zara Alina's family had to leave. Such was the ferocity, really, of the footage that was shown to the court. So I think we can expect a very significant sentence to be given to Jordan McSweeney, who has pleaded guilty to both murder and to sexually assaulting Zara Alina this summer.
Alice, thank you very much indeed for updating us with that awful case there and what their family are having to go through. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's reflect that we've got the Netflix docuseries resuming tomorrow, but we've got yet another trailer. Surprise, surprise. Netflix releasing the trailer for the final or next set of 3 episodes. More from our Royal reporter Cameron in a moment, but let's first have a listen and a look.
Certainly seen evidence that there was negative briefing from the palace against Harry and Meghan to suit other people's agendas.
You would just see it play out. Like a story about someone in the family would pop up for a minute and they go, we got to make that go away. But there's real estate on a website homepage. There is real estate there on a newspaper front cover, and something has to be filled in there about someone royal.
More dramatic music with Cameron here in the studio. Here we go again. More whinging, some may say.
More whinging, yes, but I think this is a pretty damning allegation from first Meghan's lawyer and then Meghan herself that people with inside Buckingham Palace, the palace system, were briefing journalists about negative stories against Harry and Meghan in order to make other negative stories about other members of the royal family go away. That's what the trailer was alluding to.
Sort of like a trade-off going on.
A trade-off is what the allegation seems to suggest in this trailer. Of course, we don't have both sides to this story. Buckingham Palace have not commented on this as of yet. I think this is certainly playing into the narrative following the first trailer we saw, where Prince Harry said they were happy to lie to protect my brother. We don't know who the they is in this situation from Prince Harry, but clearly this is another trailer very cleverly edited on the eve of the final 3 episodes of the documentary airing. But I must stress that Buckingham Palace have not commented, and this is clearly just one side of the story.
Yeah, and there's also, you're talking about the editing. I gather there's some comment on some words missing, for instance, from the late Queen's dedication of a life of service on 21st birthday. With some editing that your service apparently missing from that recording. Might be a minor point, but clearly there's huge sensitivities about the way that Netflix is approaching this.
Yeah, there certainly is. I think Netflix will be very much aware that every second, every frame of this documentary is going to be heavily scrutinised by press, both here in Great Britain and in the United States as well. From what royal sources have told newspapers over the weekend, I think perhaps Prince Harry seems to believe that any story about members of about him or Meghan are just automatically going to be negative in the British press regardless, and therefore he doesn't care anymore what is said about this particular documentary. Clearly we don't have that from Prince Harry firsthand, but there's this ongoing war between Prince Harry, Meghan and the British press has been going on for years and seems to continue.
And there was legal action, of course, we remember as well, with all sorts of claims. Just to go ahead to tomorrow, are you sitting back in your cinema seat and watching all 3 episodes once more?
I will be. So from 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, I'll be back in that cinema here on GB News, giving you all the latest analysis from those 3 episodes.
Good luck. Thank you very much indeed. Let's get more now with Charles Ray, former royal correspondent for The Sun. Charles, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We won't make you sit through all 3 episodes, even though clearly people are quite interested to see and hear what's being said. And just on this point about members of royal household speaking to the press, as they did with The Sun, I mean, that's gone on for decades, for years. That's the stock in trade, isn't it?
Well, let's get it right. We cannot bring up the monarch or the Prince of Wales or any other member of the royal family and ask for a comment about something that is going on in the royal family. It does not It does not work like that. They have a press office. Now, when I first started doing royal reporting about 30 years ago, the standard answer from the press office at Buckingham Palace was no comment. Simple as that. I never had a phone call from anybody at the palace or the press office, a member of the household who wanted to give us some information. Never happens. When they brought in professional spokespeople, which was a lot better, and we could check things with them, we always went to them. They never came to us to give us stories. Now, where they've got this thing about stories being planted to make William or the King look bad, save the King from looking bad, or and making Meghan and Harry look worse. It's rubbish, absolute rubbish. It doesn't operate like that. They talked about, her lawyer talked about the evidence. I'm going to be watching these 3 programs tomorrow, like Cameron, and I'm going to be looking forward to seeing what evidence they produce to show us this.
OK, because clearly there were investigations about claims of bullying in the household and so on. Those documents have not been made public. But, I mean, is it the case, just to return to what you're saying, that maybe junior members of the royal household were getting sort of tip-off fees from various newspapers if they just sort of went into the tittle-tattle, if you like?
Well, there were occasions where people who work for the royal household, were paid. There's no question about that. But, what they seem to be talking about is that some sort of negative story would crop up about William. Oh, hang on a second, we've got to get that out of the way. Let's drop a bombshell on Meghan. It's just not correct. She mentioned her father, I think, briefly in that clip. Well, hang on a second. That was an American TV organization that helped stunted up those pictures of her father, in Montecito, in America and everything else.
Yeah.
But that was, we reported that. The British newspapers reported that. We didn't get that story. It was an American story.
Yeah. OK, well, we'll see what emerges, as you say, evidence or otherwise, tomorrow in those final 3 episodes. Charles, thank you very much indeed for joining us with your particular view on it. And Thursday, tomorrow, it's released. Cameron will be going through it all for us. Well, meanwhile, the Prince and Princess of Wales have released their annual Christmas card depicting the family on a walk in the countryside. I think we can maybe have a look at that a little bit later, but it's another side of the royal story celebrating Christmas. Now, let's move back to the events at Dover. Just to confirm, 4 dead, 43 rescued. The Prime Minister expressing his sorrow at the tragic loss of human life after the small boat crossing the channel capsized or started taking on water in the early hours of this morning. Well, there's been a multi-agency response with the Royal Navy, the French Navy, Coast Guard and lifeboats all involved, and we're told the search still going on. So let's get the latest with our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, in Dover, because, Mark, you were updating us not just this particular boat, other boats had been launched as well after that, and given the conditions, the temperatures in the water and the air, of course, much concern.
Yeah, at least 6 other small boats that have crossed the channel today that Border Force and lifeboats have had to respond to, as they always do when they get word of a small migrant boat coming into UK territorial waters. And we understand that 5 people were taken off one small boat because of concerns about their health, and it may well have been weather related given the very cold temperatures out mid-channel at the moment. So those 5 were brought here within the last hour by the Dover lifeboat and have been taken ashore for assessment and treatment. Just in the last few minutes, the Ramsgate lifeboat has also arrived here in Dover. Now, Mark, this lifeboat was involved in the search and rescue operation, has been out there since the early hours, and we believe it's possible that one or more of the bodies recovered may well be on that particular lifeboat. We know that at least one body has been brought ashore so far, but others, I think, still to be brought ashore. They may well be on that Ramsgate lifeboat that is just docking in the harbour as we speak.
Yeah, and we reflect, of course, on the great job that a lot of these crews are doing with the Border Force. And just to reiterate, the French have been involved in this operation as well with a French Border Force vessel.
Yeah, they are still out there, a couple of French patrol vessels that are involved. I mean, what happens, obviously, when these boats come off the shore off the French coast, they don't want to be intercepted by the French. They refuse to comply, so the French effectively shadow that boat until it gets to UK waters to make sure if it gets into any difficulties, they can intercede and help those people. So that's what we're seeing at the moment, is a couple of French vessels, one, we believe, that's shadowing a small boat into UK waters.
OK. Mark, thank you very much indeed for updating us on that situation, as you say, with the Ramsgate lifeboat now docking and clearly the operations continuing. We'll update you as we get more. Now, let's return to the World Cup with the second semi-final kicking off this evening. France facing off against Morocco. Will they be the giant killers and head to the final on Sunday? Well, it does follow a 3-0 victory for Argentina over Croatia last night in the fact that France are still the favourites, but with the Moroccan team nicknamed the Atlas Lions still roaring, could it be Pride scoring a win? Paul Hawkins is, as ever, joining us from Doha with Paul. Maybe some people thinking, well, will this second semi-final live up to the amazing football we saw last night and a bit of Messi magic?
Yeah, I think, look, listen, whatever happens tonight, it's going to be historic. This is a huge game, massive game for Morocco, for African football, for the Arab world. Morocco are 2 games away from winning the World Cup. You have to keep pinching yourself. It's a remarkable story, and of course there are those links that France and Morocco have, which just gives an extra spice to the tie. But don't take my word for it. Let's find out how the fans are feeling. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Anis.
And Anis, you live in Sunderland, yeah?
Hi.
And you've come via Dubai here.
Yeah.
Why did you feel you had to be here?
This is a thing for all Moroccans. You know, Moroccans, they unite together when it's time to unite, and I feel the urge to come and support my team, and also the team, the Moroccan team. They've done all their best to get us to this historic moment. Like you said, it's a historic match, but it's already a historic moment already. It's the first time where a nation, an African nation, an Arab nation, has got to the semi-finals. So yeah, we're excited about it.
Yeah, is it just you're happy to be here? We'll see what happens. You can go home proud, or is it no? You're going to win, and you're going to win the World Cup.
Oh no, inshallah, we're going to win for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, but France are a good side, aren't they?
Yeah, they are a good side, but we have something with us in Morocco. It's called Nia, and we have done the Nia, so we're going to get there.
Right. Okay. How are you feeling?
I don't know. I'm
are you nervous?
Yeah, a bit, because I used to live in France.
Yeah.
So France is a good team. Morocco also, they've done a good parcours, so I don't know.
Yeah. Score prediction?
1-1 maybe, and penalty. It will be penalty, I think.
After extra time?
I'll say 2-1 to Morocco.
Great stuff, excellent. Great to meet you. You're a Mackham then, are you?
Aye.
Are you? I thought you would be, yeah.
Red and white army!
That's Morocco and Sunderland, isn't it? Great. I'll be honest, I never thought I'd bump into someone who's from Sunderland up here, but there you go. I've also heard that there are anywhere between 20 and 40,000 extra Moroccans here on top of the huge partisan support already. So there's going to be a few French people in the stadium tonight, and it's going to be wall-to-wall Morocco.
Yeah, and Paul, just in terms of the game, I guess Morocco are really going to have to rely on their defence to get through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, let's be clear. No one has scored against Morocco at this World Cup. They've only conceded 1 goal, and that was an own goal scored by Canada. So their defence will be absolutely key. But you know, they're a team that sticks at it. They've got a great togetherness. They've still got quality players. Yeah, and with a little bit of luck, because you always need a little bit of luck, they could make the final on Sunday.
Yeah, great occasion, great game. We'll be back to you, of course, throughout the afternoon. Thanks for joining us in Doha. More on that, of course, later. And we'll update you, of course, with the breaking news about the 4 people dying, 43 rescued in Dover. Mark White updating us. We'll be back in a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. Coming up, the latest from Dover, with 4 people now confirmed dead, 43 others in hospital after being rescued from the Channel. The Ramsgate lifeboat has just docked. Maybe we'll have an update on the latest with Mark White. Strikes picking up pace in the run-up to Christmas. Royal Mail workers walking out today. The travel chaos continuing. Are there any pay negotiations in the offing? We'll be hearing too from businesses being hit, they say, with their trade. Before that, though, we'll have the latest too on Buckingham Palace, now accused of briefing negative stories about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex as part of a war against Meghan, the latest on the Netflix docu-series. Let's get the headlines now with Ray.
Mark, 2 minutes past 2, let's get the latest. The Home Secretary says today's migrant tragedy shows how important it is to break up criminal gangs and stop channel crossings. 4 people have died and 43 have been rescued after a small boat capsized in the English Channel. Border Force lifeboats and a Royal Navy patrol vessel have been actively involved in the rescue operation off the Kent coast. The incident comes less than 24 hours after the PM announced renewed plans to tackle illegal migration. Suella Braverman says today's tragedy is a reminder why we need to end these crossings.
These are the days that we dread. Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
The Prime Minister has asked the lawyer investigating bullying allegations against Dominic Raab to consider 5 new formal complaints. The Deputy Prime Minister is now facing 8 allegations, all relating to his time at the Ministry of Justice. Mr Raab has previously denied the claims. Labour is calling for his suspension while the investigation is underway. Downing Street is urging the Royal College of Nursing and Ambulance Workers Unions to protect patient safety during tomorrow's historic NHS strikes. It comes after the Prime Minister defended the government's support for nurses at PM's queues. Nursing staff will walk out in England, Wales and Northern Ireland on Thursday unless a deal can be agreed. Mr Sunak says the government has tried to give them the support they need.
Last year, when everyone else in the public sector had a public sector pay freeze, the nurses received a 3% pay rise. When the RCN asked for more in-work training, we gave every nurse and midwife a £1,000 training budget. And when they asked for nurses' bursaries, we made sure that every nursing student received a £5,000 grant. That's because we do work constructively and we will continue to back our nurses.
Well, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the Tory party can't cope with the scale of the industrial action currently taking place.
After 12 years of Tory failure, winter has arrived for our public services. And we've got a Prime Minister who has curled up in a ball and gone into hibernation. If he can't act on behalf of patients or nurses or everyone who wants these strikes called off, then surely the whole country is entitled to ask, what is the point of him and what is the point of the government he's supposed to be leading?
Well, staying with strikes, and around half of Britain's rail lines are closed today as RMT members stage their second day of industrial action across the country. Thousands of workers at Network Rail and 14 train companies have walked out, leaving some parts of the UK with no service at all. It's part of a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. It comes after the RMT rejected an offer of a 5% pay rise this year, with another 4% in 2023. Inflation has fallen to 10.7%, down from 11.1% in October. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says getting inflation down is his top priority, and plans are in place now to reduce it by half. Despite the fall, Labour says the figure is still too high and shows the weakness of the economy. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says high inflation is still worrying working people.
With inflation still in double digits, it's obviously very concerning for families. Just in the lead up to Christmas, which is supposed to be a special time for families, I know that many mums and dads are going to be worrying about how they're going to heat their homes, whether they can afford the Christmas presents, the Christmas dinner that they had hoped to for their families. Now, the Chancellor will say this is all about global issues, but the truth is the UK is uniquely exposed, whether it's on inflation or economic growth.
The number of people who died in an explosion at a block of flats in Jersey has now risen to 8. The island's police says formal identification has yet to take place and one resident is still missing. The cause of the blast, which happened in the early hours of Saturday morning in St Helier, is still under investigation. And a man who murdered a law graduate is refusing to leave his cell for sentencing. The court's been told that Jordan McSweeney, who admitted killing Zara Alina in East London, doesn't want to watch video evidence of his actions. He was caught on CCTV following at least 2 other women before attacking the 35-year-old as she walked home from a night out in Ilford. He's due to be sentenced shortly. You're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Mark.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. So as we were hearing in Ray's bulletin there, 4 people have been confirmed to have died, 43 others rescued in the early hours of this morning after that vessel, one of those inflatables, capsized in the channel in the coast off Kent. In the last half-hour, sightings of the lifeboats arriving back in Dover with the search and either rescue or recovery operation continuing in the channel. Let's get the latest with our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's there on the clifftop overlooking Dover. And Mark, you were indicating the Ramsgate lifeboat in particular has been out there since the early hours of this morning.
Yes, that's right. Quite a few assets that have been out there for a very long time indeed. It's described still as a search and rescue operation, but really it is more of a recovery operation now. We are 11 hours or more since reports came through to the Coast Guard that this small migrant boat had got into difficulties about 8 miles or so offshore. 30 people were understood were actually in the water. Some were taken on board a local fishing boat that was close by, and it got to the scene quite rapidly. Then, of course, the lifeboats were quickly on the scene. It's all relative, though. I mean, I say quickly on the scene. It still takes them a while to get 8 miles out offshore, along with those border force assets as well, and eventually the Coast Guard helicopters joining them in that rescue operation. So people were taken on board, people taken on shore here to Dover, and then transferred, we understand, to hospitals, some of them suffering from the effects of the cold, understandably. Tragically, 4, though, did die. We're not at this stage privy to the cause of death, whether they drowned or whether it was as a result of their immersion into that cold water. We don't know as yet. As I say, the search and rescue operation is continuing at the moment. It will continue, I would imagine, until we are headed towards darkness, which actually isn't that far away, an hour or two before the sun disappears. And it's likely then that the search operation will be called off for the day.
It's a remarkable testimony to those rescue services and what happened, Mark, that I think of the 43 rescued, 30 were actually in the water. The fact that they actually managed to survive, really, given the circumstances and the conditions, is remarkable.
Yeah, and those migrants that were in the water, we understand they were wearing life jackets, so they were managing to stay afloat in that sense. But as I say, if you're immersed in cold weather and cold waters, I should say, in the channel, it doesn't really matter what time of the year it is. It doesn't get warm in the English Channel, and you know, any more than 10, 15 minutes in the water and you're in serious trouble.
Yeah.
Well, these people were clearly in serious trouble when the rescue services arrived. The lucky ones got on the fishing boat quite quickly, but still, by the time they all were recovered from the water, some had been in that English Channel for quite some time. And of course, while they were dealing with this, Mark, they've been dealing with what is the daily spectacle anytime there is decent weather and it's calm enough for the people smugglers to push these boats off from the French coast. That's exactly what they were doing. And at least half a dozen small boats, in addition to the one that got into difficulties, have come across into UK waters today. And while they do that, that diverts resources, because French vessels, border force and lifeboats all respond to sightings of these small boats because it's dangerous, clearly, in a very busy shipping channel, in a flimsy vessel like that, and they have to be responded to as individual rescues.
And, of course, the hard-pressed A&E department at Ashford Hospital having to treat and deal with all those that were recovered. But you pointed to the fact that, obviously, the sea itself is calm, even though it's desperately cold, and one can't imagine what the conditions are like when you're out at sea. The sea surface is calm, which is a window for them to launch these boats.
Yeah, I've been out there a few times over the years just filming migrant boats as they come across, and I can tell you, when you're out in the middle of the channel, it's very cold indeed, especially if you get a bit of a breeze whipping up across the waves. But calm, it's certainly relatively calm. It's calm enough for the people smugglers to believe that they can shove these boats into the water. Now, it may not be as a result of any waves because of weather that capsized this boat. It may have been a partial deflation. We know that these vessels are flimsy. They're made to order in China for the people smugglers, but they're not good quality at all. And we know, of course, 30 months ago, the boat that capsized or deflated in the English Channel, that was as a result of some kind of give on the seams of that particular inflatable that caused it to deflate and plunge all these people into the water. And it may be that this vessel also partially deflated, or it might be that it was swamped somehow by the wake of another vessel. It's a very busy shipping lane out there.
Yeah.
There are huge vessels, cargo ships and oil tankers that plough this particular crossing, and it may, they generate big wakes behind them as they go, and a small flimsy boat like that can succumb to those wakes quite easily.
Yeah, and of course 3:05 in the morning, pitch black, so they can't see that wave heading for them and so on. Mark, for the moment, thank you for updating us there in Dover. Back to you, of course, when we get more details. But let's get now the reaction from human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan, who's joining us. Thank you very much indeed for your time. We heard from the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, in the Commons a little earlier. These are the days that we dread, she said.
Yes, well, yes, of course. I mean, it's, extremely tragic what happened. But I would say inevitable, given the laws, given the situation we have, given Tory attitudes towards these people and their predicament. So it's, obviously, like people have been saying, it's all hollow words, it's all the same sound bites. It's just crocodile tears from the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister and so on. But the point is, if there's one person in this country who can actually do something about that, that is her. So it's not enough for her to come and express her sorrow and say her thoughts are with the family. But what are you doing about it? And obviously, it's not the first time. Every few years we'll see, tragically maybe a toddler face down in the sand, and then suddenly you say never again. Something must be done. These are, terribly dreadful incidents and terribly desperate people. But of course, nothing is still done. We have the exact same thing again and again. This is just one day after Rishi Sunak stood up, gave us his 5-point plan. Exactly the same points that we've been hearing from the Tories over more than a decade now. That might have been the exact speech that Priti Patel gave about 2 years ago. So obviously nothing is done.
Well, I was going to say, what do you make of what was announced, which was reiterated, of course, by the Home Secretary in the Commons today? Small boats operation command, drones, fixed-wing aircraft, 100 new staff in the HQ, 600 operational staff at Dover, and coordination between all the services. You still think that's nothing?
Well, the increase in staff is the one good thing. Obviously, I think it's a far too optimistic target that they've set themselves. I hope they stick to it, stand by it, which they've said, they clear the asylum backlog by the end of next year, I think they said. So that would be amazing if they did, No one should have to wait 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, more than that for a decision on their asylum.
Indeed, but this is another issue, isn't it? This is not in terms of the asylum claims being gone through. This is actually the acts of the criminal gangs pushing these boats off the shore. And we had an indication that we had this agreement with the French to try and police that. Are the French authorities failing as much in this as you would say the Tory government is?
I would say definitely. All European governments are. And the point is the laws, the policies. One thing that he promised us again yesterday, Rishi Sunak, again was, we'll have safe legal routes for asylum seekers to reach the UK, and then they won't have to resort to this. Well, that's the same thing we had. Just yesterday, people were retweeting a tweet from the Home Office, April this year, when the new Nationality Immigration Act, Priti Patel's legislation, came into effect. And they said, we now have these legal safe routes. And there were none. There are no legal safe routes. And that's exactly what we saw. Just a few weeks ago, that embarrassing, shameful performance by Suella Braverman in Parliament. I think she was giving evidence maybe to the Home Office Select Committee or one of the parliamentary committees. And she was asked about, I think it was a Tory MP who asked, well, I'm an asylum seeker, somewhere else in some other country in the world. What do I do to claim asylum in the UK? And she had no answer because there is nothing. And she said, well, get to the UK and then claim asylum.
Right.
Well, that's exactly what these people are doing. There's no legal
challenge that,
so they have to do this.
Those comments were made in relation to the situation with Albania, where we have this agreement, again outlined by the Prime Minister. A quarter, at least, of the 45,000 migrants who crossed this year are Albanians. In terms of the process that's gone through so far, and it is very slow, I know, for asylum claims, none have been granted. And yet, when we look at Syria, Afghanistan and Iran, those who are claiming asylum, 98% success rate. So there is a specific particular problem here that maybe they're not asylum seekers, they are economic migrants or those who are being processed by the criminal gangs.
I mean, but that is a matter. I mean, if we're not making the decisions and we're not enforcing them, then we won't ever know. I mean, I really don't believe in this concept of safe countries and no one from that country can ever be an asylum seeker. I mean, however civilized, developed a first world country, there are people there who can be persecuted, who can be targeted by the government or other groups, who will be vulnerable in that country. The point is to look at each case individually.
From Albania, then?
Sorry?
Well, just to say, if it's a quarter of the 45,000 coming across, you're saying that there are 12,000 people from Albania who need to claim asylum?
No, I'm not saying that. So that's exactly what I'm saying. There will be some people in Albania. It's not impossible that someone in Albania will need our help. And that's so the whole point is you look at each case separately. You can't just distinguish and, there can't be a blanket ban on asylum seekers from Albania. That's the whole point. But if we have safe legal routes for asylum seekers, people can arrive here, we process their claims. Those who are found not to be in need of our support can be returned. But the point is, where is that system? Where is that process?
Shoaib Khan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And, of course, we will continue to monitor the situation down at Dover and update people. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's remind you that coming up, the inflation figures are out, down but not out. The price of a shopping basket still going up and up. We'll be running through the numbers with our business editor, Liam, as ever. First, let's get an update on the weather. It's still a bit chilly out there.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. More cold and frosty weather to come through the rest of this week. There are signs of a change as we go through the weekend. Still icy and, in places, still some snow falling. This area of low pressure never quite made it in. That's got some warm air, but it's not heading towards us. We've still got the northerly winds bringing more snow showers across northern Scotland, although the winds are now easing just a little bit, particularly across Shetland. But with more snow showers coming in here, a mixture of rain, sleet and snow showers for Northern Ireland and eastern England. Could turn icy as we go through the evening and overnight. So we do have Met Office yellow weather warnings in place. For the vast majority, it is simply clear and cold. Temperatures dropping well below freezing, even in towns and cities. And where there's any snow lying on the ground across Scotland, well, we could get down to -10 to -13. And there will be more snow showers coming in across northern Scotland. Hit and miss, but a few more centimetres likely in places. More than that over hills. And during the course of tomorrow, a few more of these wintry showers coming into parts of northeast England. So again, a covering of snow is possible in places, particularly over the North York Moors. Same goes for northern parts of Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, most places, simply dry and sunny and cold, with temperatures struggling to get much above freezing during the day and quickly through the evening. As soon as the sun sets, temperatures dropping, and we'll see another hard frost forming. Still a few wintry showers across eastern England and across northern Scotland, so it could turn icy, but a bit of a shift as we go through tomorrow evening. Weather coming in from the northwest. That will bring snow to the Highlands and potentially through the central belt of Scotland for a time during Friday. So again, Met Office yellow warnings in place for that. Something we need to keep a close eye on during Friday. Could be a bit of a mixture through the central belt of rain, sleet or snowfall. Mostly rain across Northern Ireland with some snow on the hills. So a bit of a change and then more of a change for Sunday as we see things turning wetter, but also quite a bit milder.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deems & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Now, would you like a bit of good news in the economy? And it is a little bit. Latest inflation figures out. Slight drop, a dip to 10.7%, but still double digits, of course. And not the best news for British Christmas tables, because food and drink prices, well, they're still on the up and up. Cost of living at a 40-year high still. Let's get the details now with Liam, as ever, with On the Money. So a little bit of good news.
We have to take it where we can get it these days, Mark.
Absolutely.
Beggars can't be choosers.
Down from 11.1% to 10%.
Plunging.
Yeah.
These numbers, they seem arcane and, they come from the Office for National Statistics, but they reflect the real struggle of tens of millions of British households. So the inflation number, if we can look at the graphic, is down from 10.7% down to 7.7% in November. It was 11.1% in October. So what this means is in November, Mark, the Consumer Price Index, the basket of goods and services that we buy that the ONS follows, it was 10.7% more expensive in November this year than compared to November the previous year. But if we drill down into some of those numbers, while fuel prices are increasing at a lower rate, food prices are up much more. We can see food inflation there is at 16.5%, bread up 20% compared to last November, eggs 24%, milk 37%, pasta, which lots of families use as a cheap form of carbohydrate.
Not so cheap anymore.
Quick and easy for working parents. It's 37% higher, which of course reflects higher wheat and grain prices, not least because of that war between Russia and Ukraine. And we've said it for a long time here on GB News, Mark. The headline rate of inflation, it's really high, but it's much higher if you're less well off, unfortunately, because more vulnerable households spend a higher proportion of their income on food. And food inflation is well above the headline rate of inflation.
On those staples. As you say, what's helped is that the forecourt price on petrol has come down, diesel as well. And that does feed through because, as we were discussing earlier, transport costs such a big part of the economy. So that will lower inflation. the key question with the Bank of England meeting tomorrow for the interest rate decision is, has this inflation peaked now? Because they were looking at 13% as a high.
Well, we were saying last week and earlier this week, weren't we, Mark, that we thought inflation, when this number came out today, would be lower. I would say it possibly has peaked, but there's always a but in economics. But that could be knocked off course if there is a further flare-up in relations between Russia and the Western world, if there is more determination by the OPEC exporters cartel of oil-producing companies to limit their production, we could see gas prices, oil prices spike again, and that would push inflation back up. But in the absence of that, let's assume that's not going to happen, then it does look likely that the Bank of England will be correct if tomorrow it raises interest rates by less than we previously thought it would. So we could see a quarter point or possibly a half point interest rate rise tomorrow rather than the 3/4 point rise that we had before.
Right.
Another interesting thing, I didn't mention it in the last hour, it's worth saying, the pound is now recovering quite a lot. It's back up at $1.23. It was down at $1.04 at the height of the fallout from the mini budget. Yeah. It's up at $1.23. That's partly because the UK economy, for all the doom and gloom, is holding up relatively well compared to the other big economies. Our growth isn't particularly bad. Our inflation is, in fact, a little bit lower, even though it's high in historic terms. What's also happening, Mark, is that the Federal Reserve, the world's leading central bank in the US, they are now thinking increasingly, you get this sense from listening to their interest rate setters, that they are now calling, I would say, maybe that's too strong a word, that this inflation has peaked. So if the Federal Reserve isn't raising interest rates by a lot, then that makes the dollar less attractive and weaker, and so sterling goes up. And that higher pound, Mark, that really helps because that means our imports are cheaper, which keeps inflation bearing down.
And fuel, petrol.
And fuel, because we import a lot of fuel and it's priced in dollars.
And how important is this reading into sentiment? Because, of course, people, if they are worried and they're looking at things, they don't go out and spend. They don't get the economy going. And the flip side of this, of course, is that we are still expecting us to be in recession. 2 quarters of negative growth heading into the new year.
That's right. It's often said that the darkest moment is before the dawn, and it may be that that's where we are. A recession is nailed on, I would say. In the third quarter of this year, we had the confirmation earlier this week, didn't we, that the UK economy contracted. If it also contracts in November, December, January, then that 3 months too, then we've got a recession, 2 successive quarters. And the Bank of England certainly thinks that it will. On the other hand, retail sales are bearing up in the run-up to Christmas. Maybe people are just borrowing lots of money to keep the cash
and just decide, let's have a Christmas
tills ringing after 2 pretty miserable Christmases. Despite the train drivers' strike and the other strikes, maybe people are thinking, let's spend a bit of money and let's try and have a little bit of Christmas cheer. Though even in those headlines, Mark, the devil's always in the detail. Those retail sales headlines, yes, retail sales are up, but only by value, not by volume, because for everything we spend, we're getting less actual goods. So I'd say the economic outlook is on a knife edge.
OK, and on that particular question, you're with us tomorrow at GBNews Live for the interest rate decision.
I am indeed.
Live at 12 noon, of course. Look forward to that. I don't know, is that the right phrase? I don't know. Anyway, we've been dissecting the figures there. We'll be dissecting the Harry and Meghan trailer coming up. The second part of that 6-episode docuseries hitting Netflix tomorrow. And, of course, updating you from Dover on the latest with 4 people being pronounced dead. 43 recovered. The latest with Mark White there. News update now with Ray.
Thanks, Mark. It's 2:31. Here's the latest. The Home Secretary says today's migrant tragedy shows how important it is to break up criminal gangs and stop channel crossings. 4 people have died and 43 others were rescued after a small boat capsized in the channel. The incident comes less than 24 hours after the Prime Minister announced renewed plans to tackle illegal migration. Suella Braverman says today's tragedy is a reminder why we have to end these crossings.
These are the days that we dread. Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers. Evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
The Prime Minister has asked the lawyer investigating bullying allegations against Dominic Raab to consider 5 new formal complaints. The Deputy Prime Minister is now facing 8 allegations, all relating to his time at the Ministry of Justice. Mr Raab has previously denied the claims. Labour is calling for his suspension while the investigation is underway. 6 Chinese officials, including the Consul General, have been removed from the UK over an incident involving a Hong Kong pro-democracy protester. Bob Chan was demonstrating on the grounds of the consulate in Manchester when he was attacked in October. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says the government requested diplomatic immunity be waived so the men could be questioned by police.
Greater Manchester Police initiated an investigation. As part of that investigation, requested that 6 Chinese officials waive diplomatic immunity so they could be questioned. We informed the Chinese embassy of that, and we set a deadline which expired today, making it clear that we expected them to take action.
The man who murdered a law graduate refused to leave his cell for sentencing this morning. The court's been told that Jordan McSweeney, who admitted killing Zara Alina in East London, doesn't want to watch video evidence of his actions. He was caught on CCTV following at least 2 other women before attacking the 35-year-old as she walked home from a night out in Ilford. He's due to be sentenced shortly. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back to Mark in just a moment.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious, much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. Another day, another trailer, it seems. Yes, Netflix has released the latest trailer for the second set of 3 episodes of Harry and Meghan's docu-series. And we'll have more reaction on, another controversy with our royal reporter Cameron Walker. But let's have a watch and a listen first.
I've certainly seen evidence that there was negative briefing from the palace against Harry and Meghan to suit other people's agendas.
You would just see it play out. Like a story about someone in the family would pop up for a minute, and they go, we gotta make that go away. But there's real estate on a website homepage. There is real estate there on a newspaper front cover, and something has to be filled in there about someone royal.
Well, let's get more with Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, who's going to be sitting watching all 3 episodes tomorrow morning and reflecting here on GB News. However, already yet more controversy, because we heard then and saw from a lawyer, no less, alleging that the royal household had been deliberately planting negative stories about the Sussexes to deflect from coverage of other royals. I mean, it's a pretty serious charge.
It's a very, very serious allegation. The fact that this Shillings lawyer, who has represented Harry and Meghan in the past, says she has evidence that Buckingham Palace was planting negative stories against, briefing against Harry and Meghan to make perhaps other members of the royal family look good. That's what's alluded to in the trailer. Was going on. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace are not commenting on this matter, but if you remember back to Oprah 2021, that Meghan had an allegation which seemed to say the same thing. So if you remember, there was a story back in the day that Meghan made Kate cry over a bridesmaid dress disagreement, whereas Meghan in the Oprah interview then corrected the record from her point of view, saying that it was actually the other way round, and it was Kate that made me cry, and the palace didn't correct the story.
Yeah, and then all those allegations about bullying as well within the household.
Yeah.
And we heard there was an independent investigation. The details have not emerged of that. And yet we're learning from this lawyer, Jenny Affair, that she's seen evidence. That word evidence. I mean, are we likely to see some kind of document in this thing tomorrow?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? If it's just empty words and just saying, yes, I have evidence, then I don't think many people are going to take it as fact. However, if this documentary does produce genuine evidence that that was going on inside Buckingham Palace, then clearly there are bigger questions to answer. The problem is we don't know. That's the issue here.
And there was this indication of the sort of war, as they described it, between the 2 households, with William and Kate, Prince and Princess of Wales as they are now, and the Sussexes, that the Fab Four had fallen out, and therefore they were sort of vying for attention. We've not heard from the Prince and Princess of Wales, but they have issued their Christmas card, sort of trying to rise above it all, I guess, showing a very happy family scene.
Yeah, they are. It's certainly brightening up the cold and dark days as we've been having. It's their annual Christmas cards, of course. Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, we hardly ever get official photographs of them, but in exchange for leaving them alone while they're at school, making sure that paparazzi aren't chasing them down the streets, the Prince and Princess of Wales very occasionally, usually on their birthdays and at Christmas, release official photographs of them, and that's what we're seeing here.
And they're still living in fairly modest circumstances in Windsor Great Park. I mean, they're not actually in Windsor Castle, they're in a smaller house.
Yes, as we understand it, they're in Adelaide Cottage, which is on the Windsor estate, so still within the perimeter of the armed police compound, as it were, but not in the main castle, no. From William and Kate's perspective, they want to give their children as normal a life as possible before they are thrust into the public spotlight. Of course, occasionally we've seen them, and in fact this year we've seen the kids a lot more often than we otherwise would have. First, because of the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and then, of course, Her Majesty's passing. We saw them, George and Charlotte, at the funeral.
And what do you think their response will be to this? Is it going to continue to be never complain, never explain, as, of course, you know, the late Queen always said?
So I think, from my understanding, they're not going to be commenting on this. However, like you said, never complain, never explain, as the late Queen so famously did, even she broke that following the Oprah interview where she set a precedent with that statement saying recollections may vary.
Yeah.
I suspect Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace are waiting to see the full documentary before they decide whether or not to comment. But as it stands, they are not commenting.
OK, Cameron, for the moment, thank you. And more analysis to come with the full, 3 programmes.
3 episodes from 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Good luck. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's move back to the events that we've been updating you on in Dover. Now, 2 lifeboats have arrived back in port after that search and recovery or rescue operation in the Channel. 4 people have died, we're told, 43 others rescued in the early hours of this morning when that inflatable started to take on water or capsized mid-channel. In the House of Commons, MPs appealing to the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, to clamp down on the people smugglers carrying those people across from the French coast. Let's get the very latest with our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, in Dover. And on that particular point, Mark, I mean, this does follow the pattern where we get this window in the weather, even though it's horrendously cold. The sea conditions have allowed them to launch off the beaches once more.
Yeah, I mean, during the summer, when weather conditions are obviously far calmer in the Channel, it tends to be spread out a bit, so you maybe get 200 or 300 coming over multiple days in the course of a week. What happens though if you get a week of bad weather, then effectively they're stacking up on the other side of the Channel. We know, according to our producer who's been over there in recent days, there's still some 6,000 people camped in makeshift encampments around Dunkirk alone, and that doesn't even take into account those that are camped around Calais. And when they get the opportunity, when the weather is calm enough, then you get a surge. That's why at the weekend we had 500 across. Today, in addition to the boat that got into difficulties about 3 a.m, there were another 6 small migrant boats that came across the Channel. And while, of course, the authorities were trying to deal with this very significant search and rescue operation, they also had to respond to these other sightings, which was diminishing the assets that they had available to continue with that air search and sea search and rescue operation that's still ongoing at the moment. But we've got, about an hour and a half or so of light left here. And when the light fades, I think it's likely that the main search and rescue operation will be called off.
Yeah, we understand that it may have been a fishing boat that initially came across them and managed to help, with, I think, 30 people actually being literally plucked from the water. I mean, it's extraordinary that they managed to survive, given the water temperatures and the fact that they were allowed to set sail from the beaches, given the conditions at the moment.
Well, I mean, the people smugglers, I mean, they're not stupid, clearly, the people smugglers, and they've got a business model that works for them. It's not in their interest to kill those that they send out into the Channel. But you know, clearly it's still a very dangerous enterprise, given that this is a very busy shipping lane. And when the weather conditions are better, they know that they can make it across most of the time. But it doesn't take much to turn what is a hazardous voyage into a tragic voyage. And that might be as simple as the wake from one of these very big vessels that navigate this very busy shipping lane. And they do create huge wakes behind them. And of course, at night, when you can't see a big wake coming towards a migrant boat like this, it could certainly overwhelm a migrant boat or even capsize it. We know, as you say, that about 30 people ended up in the water. Some managed to stay on the vessel, but those 30 in the water were in the water for quite some considerable time before some of them were rescued by the fishing boat initially. Then we had, of course, the lifeboats, border force vessels arriving on scene.
Yeah, we've heard too from the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, in the Commons, reiterating the announcements from Rishi Sunak yesterday on this sort of small boats command. But, I mean, it does appear that this operation today was pretty well coordinated, with the French involved as well.
Yes, I mean, in terms of the sort of cooperation and the way they work, they've been working, you know, very well together for some considerable time. Now they've got a more permanent command that will be called the Small Boats Operational Command. That means effectively those that are on secondment are permanently part of that staffing and should, in theory, mean that they are working together more efficiently. That's at least the thinking behind this move to make it more of a permanent structure. And with that will come, according to the Home Secretary confirmed in her statement today, more resources. She said a doubling of the resources that they will have devoted to this operation. Some 100 additional personnel at the Small Boats Operational Hub headquarters in London, and some 600 down here in Dover and Manston and in other areas where these small boats come across.
Mark, thank you for updating us there on the cliff, of course, overlooking the Dover port. As we were reporting earlier, 2 lifeboats, including Ramsgate, now have docked there. So clearly, as you say, you've got about an hour or 2 of light left with the search continuing. Thank you very much indeed. Well, plenty of your views coming in on what we've been updating you on, with Robert being in touch with us to say, in my view, this is in effect the French allowing people to be sent to their deaths. They need to put a stop to it from their end. Phil saying, I think that members of Parliament who disagree with the government policy and believe all asylum seekers should be accepted into this country should house them in their constituency. Too many needless deaths before we tackle the small boats problem. John, meanwhile, says any of these human rights lawyers thought about turning their efforts to tracking down the gangs who offer transport to the UK for the illegal migrants. We'll keep the views coming, and of course, GBViews at gbnews.uk as ever, and we'll continue to update you with Mark down at Dover and what's happening with that operation. But let's update you now on the latest on the World Cup, because we've got that second semi-final kicking off this evening. France facing off against Morocco for a place in Sunday's final. Will there be some more giant killing going on? France, of course, the favourites, but the Moroccan team, nicknamed the Atlas Lions, hoping their pride will see them roar to a win, it says here. I didn't write that. The winner taking on Argentina in the final after that 3-0 victory over Croatia last night, and a bit of messy magic. Let's get more with Paul Hawkins, our reporter, or our man in Doha. There with a, pretty excited audience, because clearly, in terms of Morocco, they're getting quite a bit of home support, if you like, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, yeah, just so you know where we are, just some Argentina fans over here that are congregating with the Moroccans. And as you can see, all the fans are mixing together right now, but the Moroccans have slightly gate-crashed the Argentina love party over there. But it's this is pretty much what it's like, been like in the World Cup most nights in the soup. And whenever someone starts making a noise, it's like moths to a flame. Look at how the crowd suddenly sweeps in and everyone joins in and the phones go up in the air. And that's pretty, if you want a crowd, it's not difficult to get one. Just make a load of noise and jump around like a wally, frankly. But yeah, it's basically, you might as well be in Morocco, frankly, here. They reckon somewhere around 20 to 40,000 Moroccans have arrived in Doha, and there is a reason for that, because the Moroccan Football Federation has offered 13,000 free tickets, and actually Royal Air Maroc, the national carrier of Morocco, was going to lay on 30 extra flights, but the Qatari officials stepped in and said, no, you can only lay on an extra 7. So some people have been left disappointed, but others have still decided to come anyway on the 7 extra flights that have been laid on. There are tens of thousands more Moroccans here. Add to that people who aren't Moroccan who were supporting Morocco anyway, and you've got a pretty partisan crowd at the Al Janoub Stadium this evening.
I was going to say, I can't see any berets or striped jumpers or baguettes behind you.
Sorry, say that again. Say that again, Mark.
I was going to say, I can't see any berets, striped jumpers or baguettes behind you in that crowd.
Well, have a look for yourself. If you can spot one, Mark, you're more eagle-eyed than me. You won't see a baguette for miles. It's basically a sea of Morocco. But what I will say is, though, earlier today, earlier today there were a lot of there were a decent amount of French fans, but let's not lie, the French fans are vastly outnumbered here, and it's just really a question of if Morocco do make it to the final on Sunday, if you're a neutral, are you going to go for the Messi story, Messi winning the World Cup, or are you going to go for Morocco winning the World Cup? Two very compelling arguments for your support.
Yeah, a fairy tale in either sense, but let's talk about what may be happening tonight. I mean, do the Moroccans actually have a chance against the reigning champions?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. If you're a betting man, the odds are that France are going to win. They're, with the current world champions. They've won it twice. They've got quality players. We know about the French, but don't write off Morocco. No one has scored a goal against Morocco at this World Cup, apart from the Moroccans themselves, who scored an own goal when they played Canada. So their defence is their rock. They've got quality players. You look at Hakimi, who plays for Paris Saint-Germain, Ziyech, who plays for Chelsea. They've got quality players all over the pitch. They do have the tools to hurt the French. Is that what's going to happen tonight? We'll have to wait and see, but definitely don't write off Morocco. And if they were to go on and get to the final, it's one of the great sporting shocks of all time, quite frankly. And if they were to win it, well, look how they're acting now, just before the semi-final. If they're going to win it, then frankly, Doha's going to take off. Add to that the Champs-Élysées and the Edgware Road.
Yeah. And just to talk about the Argentinian cohort there, they're supporting Morocco as well?
The Argentinian cohort, I don't know, probably, yeah, you would say they probably are, because even though Morocco have played really well, if you're Argentinian, you'd rather still play Morocco than play the French, let's be honest. So definitely Argentinian support here for the Moroccans this evening. Very difficult to find any French fans.
Yeah, I think you said that quietly enough so they didn't hear it, and security standing by to help you just in case they did hear it. Paul in the souk with a great crowd. Thank you very much for updating us once more. We'll see what emerges in that fairy tale tonight, of course. Paul Doha, our man, Paul Hawkins, our man in Doha with all the latest there. You've been watching GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. Stay with us. We'll have the latest from Mark White, of course, in Dover with the rescue operation continuing. Patrick up next with you, and stay with us here on GB News.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. More cold and frosty weather to come through the rest of this week. There are signs of a change as we go through the weekend. Still icy and, in places, still some snow falling. This area of low pressure never quite made it in. That's got some warm air, but it's not heading towards us. We've still got the northerly winds bringing more snow showers across northern Scotland, although the winds are now easing just a little bit, particularly across Shetland. But with more snow showers coming in here, a mixture of rain, sleet and snow showers for Northern Ireland and eastern England. Could turn icy as we go through the evening and overnight. So we do have Met Office yellow weather warnings in place. For the vast majority, it is simply clear and cold. Temperatures dropping well below freezing, even in towns and cities. And where there's any snow lying on the ground across Scotland, well, we could get down to -10 to -13. And there will be more snow showers coming in across northern Scotland. Hit and miss, but a few more centimetres likely in places. More than that over hills. And during the course of tomorrow, a few more of these wintry showers coming into parts of northeast England. So again, a covering of snow is possible in places, particularly over the North York Moors. Same goes for northern parts of Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, most places, simply dry and sunny and cold, with temperatures struggling to get much above freezing during the day, and quickly through the evening, as soon as the sun sets, temperatures dropping, and we'll see another hard frost forming. Still a few wintry showers across eastern England and across northern Scotland, so it could turn icy, but a bit of a shift as we go through tomorrow evening. Weather coming in from the northwest. That will bring snow to the Highlands and potentially through the central belt of Scotland for a time during Friday. So again, Met Office yellow warnings in place for that. Something we need to keep a close eye on during Friday. Could be a bit of a mixture through the central belt of rain, sleet or snowfall. Mostly rain across Northern Ireland with some snow on the hills. So a bit of a change, and then more of a change for Sunday as we see things turning wetter, but also quite a bit milder.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News.